G'day guys, good morning, good evening to others in the Americas, so to speak. Now let's get from the top here. AG, good to see you, mate. God, accuse some curly questions. Oh, that's normal. Remember, you can't do this in the afternoon. I did leave a comment that I'm using Restream because I'll be out of StreamYard points or hours. And obviously, next week it'll be all Restream. So putting early comments, they'll just disappear like that. So it will be gone. Anyway, if the last three generations of my family are German, would there be certain foods that my ancestors would have eaten and are better for me? Thank you. I know the Germans actually consumed a lot of pork for multiple generations. One of their favorite foods. It's only when actually the East Germans still consume quite a bit of pork in comparison to the West Germans, who are influenced by American sort of culture and food styles. So traditional, even, let's put it this way, even the American population traditionally consumed pork and lard. Remember, Cincinnati used to be called the pork polis of the United States, because basically pork is easy to produce. Back then, before we had refrigeration, before we had things like automobiles and cars, as we call them in other parts of the world, and before we had actually, I do like automobile because it is ancient Greek related, afto, which is auto or automata. And so, yeah, it's got a bit of that in it. But anyway, go back to I got sidetracked. Before we had those sort of means, it was much easier keeping smaller animals in closer proximity. That's why we used to have chickens for eggs and pork, lamb, and goat in different parts of the world, primarily for our general food. Beef was the occasion, not the normal thing. It's the reason why I usually do recommend people consume more pork. It is higher in both thiamine and niacin, which are very important for the electron chain. And so, and the Germans traditionally did consume quite a lot of pork sausages, pork belly, all sorts of things related to pork. So I would say your genetics are more like mine, southern Greece, Greece and parts like that. Probably the islanders in Greece would have more adaptation to things like goats and sheep, but it depends on the island, But generally speaking, for the majority of our ancestral existence, it's pretty much been these smaller animals that we've had access to. I mean, even the chimps, what do they consume? Other smaller apes, but also piglets. So the adaptation to eating swine, so to speak, goes way, way back to our early evolutionary past. So basically, I don't see a problem with it. It's a good food and it's been consumed much higher, and it's one of the best sources of both thiamine and niacin in the diet. Is particular thiamine, There's not many foods out there that actually come up. I've shown that before, the information. So you guys are well adapted to that and probably have a higher requirement. So certain populations, require higher. So yeah, I would say consider those types of foods. Cured foods as well, because you guys consumed quite a bit of cured things, also some raw meats and other things like that. So consider adding some of those components. have you got grandparents still around that you can ask what they traditionally had in their environment, consumed and stuff like that? Maybe you'll get some ideas from them. Anyway, Nick, g'day, mate. I stopped by before and show begins, and to thank Harry for the content he released this week. You're welcome. I really do appreciate the time, effort you always put into the material. Good night, everyone. Good night to you, mate. So Nick's, I believe, in North America, so probably going early to bed because he's got probably work tomorrow or something to do. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the equatorial diet? Is it most important to eat in line with where you live now rather than where your ancestors come from? Thank you. I haven't heard of the equatorial diet. Is that what they call it? But I have heard of two concepts out there. One concept is eat what you're adapted to is one concept, and the other concept, eat based on what the environment you're in. Jack Kruse talks a lot about the mitochondrial side of things, and and a number of other researchers about that, eating foods that have got the sort of the hydrogen bond structures and are related to that environment are more in sync or more in tune with that part of the world. And it's your body's more, you could say, closer adapted to both the things within that environment and the relationship between those things that have grown in that environment from the light sources, the photonics of our star, and how they interact with us and all that. So there's probably some validity in that regard. But at the end, I think when we look at the tropical environments, while we can see people live, didn't suffer chronic diseases like in Southeast Asia and stuff like that, and areas like that, people that did consume more of the plant-based type food didn't live as long, where people that did consume more animal foods tend to basically live longer lives, longer existences. They do tend to be, like in Southeast Asia, one thing I've noticed, people that are in the more lowlands, so to speak, and sort of they tend to eat more plants. And when you go into the more elevated and sort of, because I've been into elevated areas where Mira's got friends and relatives, and you can actually, even though I can withstand the cold quite well, in some elevations you could actually, go, this is fresh, it's cool. And the type of food that around that I noticed is a lot of animals. You don't really notice plants because they don't really grow in that elevation. It's the same thing like in the mountainous areas of Greece, which is 85% of the country. Again, you don't see much plants because for the simple reason. And these people, like the Sardinians, who are pastoral, the Icarians who are pastoral, and many of my ancestors who are pastoral as well lived in these sort of mountainous areas. They lived very long lives unless they, passed away from some communicable disease, or, like my grandfather died at 87, and his brother, Alekos, he died at, 89, again from pneumonia. If they hadn't, they would have continued living longer than that, because their father actually died at 107. My dad's grandfather, my great-grandfather. So, basically, to be honest, my grandfather wouldn't listen to anyone. He was he hated doctors. So I'm not surprised he waited until the real end before he went to see a doctor, but then it was too late. Pneumonia had set in. He was quite sick when they got him down from the village to the town. which is quite a few hours, I can tell you, to get there, and a lot of winding roads. It's a mountainous area, I usually sleep all the way going there and coming back. It's the only way to do it. Just fucking one winding road after another. Anyway, yeah, look, my sort of personal view is that you need to optimize for the sort of more ancestral, because when we lived in these tropical areas, we were eating more ancestral for larger periods. So we're more adapted. Now, can we tolerate certain foods more? Yeah, we could probably tolerate more sugar in the tropics because we can deplete deuterium from the plants and all that. Is it optimal? No. Can you tolerate it? Is it going to be less damaging if you eat a fruit in the tropics compared to eating it in Canada? Definitely. There's going to be quite a lot of different mitochondrial damage, because you don't have that additional depletion capacity. But then again, if you're indoors, let's say you're in Java, for instance, and let's say you're in the capital of Jakarta and you work in an office all day from the morning until the evening, you're not getting much vitamin D, but forget about that because you can supplement, but you're not getting any exposure to UV to deplete deuterium. What diet do you think you should be on under those circumstances? Definitely an ancestral, because you're going to be in trouble otherwise because you can't deplete deuterium. So that's going to damage your mitochondria over time. Your mitochondrial density is going to reduce. Your capacity to repair, to heal yourself is going to reduce. And over time, you will decline and age much faster. We see that with a lot of people in the sort of the vegan and all that, their whole system falls apart. They really end up with a lot of mitochondrial damage. They come back to me and, it's really hard to fix them because you've done too much mitochondrial damage. We've got massive mitochondrial density when we're born. And then what we put in our mouths has an effect. So while I can say, yes, you can tolerate certain things in certain type of climatic parts of the planet, I still don't think it's optimal. I think the best thing is to be in those tropics and actually eat an animal-based diet, deplete deuterium and run a much lower grade of deuterium and have really good mitochondrial efficiency and mitochondrial health into very old age. And I think if you do that, and I notice the people that basically consume animal foods, they don't consume a lot of rice, they don't consume a lot of tubers and stuff like that, but they consume a lot of greens and animal foods and stuff like that in the tropics, they tend to be healthy and live and more robust and living longer. So, and they also succumb less to things like dengue fever and malaria. That's what I've noticed. Now, that's anecdotal, but that's what I've noticed. Where I see other people that are eating too many carbohydrates, they literally, even young people, suffering severe cases of dengue or malaria. So, yeah. And I can tell you, I've actually suffered. I didn't actually check myself whether it was malaria or dengue, but I can tell you, I did have tablets with me and I took them and, did a few other things. But I can tell you, and, I was out getting enough vitamin D and all that. So it didn't really affect me. I had probably about 1 or 2 days where severe muscle pain and all that, and then it just went away. And I think that additional vitamin D, being out the sun, not avoiding the sun, like a lot of the Indonesians do because they don't want their skin being as dark. It's again that sort of strange whiteness mentality that they've picked up from the colonial days. But yeah, that's the thing that I would prioritize in a sense. Yeah. Anyway, what do you think is the best salt to consume? Because of microplastics, I don't recommend sea salt because of potential both increase in certain heavy metals. I don't recommend Himalayan salt type things, those mined salts, because I don't know what locality. If I knew the locality, what sort of contaminants were in that environment, what sort of heavy metals and stuff like that, then I would say, okay, I can recommend this, but I can't. So what do I consume? I think I've shown you guys before. I consume things like which are from riverbeds, which are clean. There's one in Western Australia, which is a really good river there. And then the salt beds, which are further upstream. So they don't have any contaminants, whether agricultural or non-agricultural. That's one. And I actually use that. It's a really nice salt. It's sort of, I've shown it before on this site. Actually, I've got the box. I might as well bring it out. Give me a sec. So that's the Murray River salt. Shit. I've got a thing on a towel on my seat to basically, the ass needs to be comfortable while you're sitting here for quite a few hours. So, yeah. So basically, that's one of them. Let me just plug in before I do some damage here and have things flying all over the place. Us oldies, Look at this fucking hair. Just, it's poking out here, and it's grown out of proportion, And back here, you can see I've just basically brushed it really hard. Never stops growing. That bloody carnivore diet. That's all I can bloody say. I should have been bald like my cousin. Then I wouldn't have to worry about all this hair. Anyway, so, oops, wrong click. So basically that, and the other one that I use, which I don't have any at the moment, I threw away the box, but I've still got it in my grinder, but I need to buy some more, is a salt lake. It's in, trying to remember which part of, it's in the north west of Western Australia. What is it called again? I can't remember. So it's a salt lake, and it's salt bed, and they basically use very good environmental approaches. So they only seasonally take it off and then leave it alone, so it can actually rebuild, so that it's a renewable resource. So it is a bit more pricey, but I actually like using it on my steaks and that sort of stuff. This one, because it's flakes, you can actually put it in and they'll melt in your mouth. And they've got and because of the sort of the slight different profile in the minerals, it has a sort of a sweet sort of taste. It's really nice. It's probably the nicest salt that I've ever come across is this Murray River salt, because of the taste. So it's really good to basically sprinkle on things, or if you're gonna use it for things like, let's say you're doing a fast. I don't use the other salt. I use this salt because it's much nicer to put in water and actually consume, because it's got that nice. It's not a sort of a really high briny type, taste. It's got a much more pleasant taste to it. So yeah. So pretty much because of contaminants in the sea, pretty much of heavy metal contaminants in these sort of mined areas, I will give those a miss, and I usually go for lake beds. So I don't know where you are in the world, but if you're of a really, I think is it Utah that actually has a really good lake bed that actually they I think they collect salt from there, and it's, I don't know how relatively clean it is, the environment, so I can't really tell you. I haven't really looked into American salts or other salts around the world. I've just looked into Australian salts. These are both that I get is Australian salts, local, that I'm happy with. So I couldn't really tell you about your country. You'd have to do a bit of research. But I would say stay clear of the sea salts unless they are from the southern hemisphere. That probably are probably much safer in terms of microplastic contaminants. But if you really want to avoid most contaminants, it's probably old riverbeds and areas that are in sort of environments that are fairly clean and very far away from industrial activity. I can't think of anything else in that regard. I mean, yeah, it is a problem for the majority of the population around the world. I accept that. I realize that it's not there are no easy solutions here. Unfortunately, it's basically just being aware of those sort of issues that do exist with different sourcing. Anyway, hope that helps. You need to do a bit of research. There are other people in the carnivore community, carnivore space, and the low carb space that probably have done some research on some of these salts in different countries, the countries that they are in. It's like myself, I've looked at my own country, which is Australia, and looked at basically what is available for me here. And me and my family, but beyond that, yeah, sort of. Anyway, do you still recommend taking Dietary? Yep, I do. Depends on the circumstances. Some people that are coming off a SAD diet or a vegan diet or stuff like that, I do definitely recommend it, that they take it for at least 6 months, if not more, and to do the B vitamin protocol as well with vitamin D, because usually they are depleted of fat-soluble vitamins, including vitamin D, and tend to have a very pathogenic and very bad microbiome by the time they get to a carnivore diet. Now, animal foods are very high in B vitamins, so they can replenish those B vitamins in that regard, but it takes time, and so that's why we use the sort of the B50 complex, and the best B50 complexes are the ones that are very low in pantothenic acid. 50 or below is the better. 25 I usually like much better. So that's still, if you've checked out my videos on C. diff and all sorts of other things, really important to be able to use it. As long as you maintain good levels. I periodically do it, but don't constantly do it. So I've got none at the moment. I'm not taking any. I've already done about, 6 months or 8. Last time I did 8 months. Then last year I did about, nearly 6 months. And then this year I've done none. I don't see the value of it at this stage. I may give it a miss this year and may do 3 months next year. But at this stage, I may not even do that, depending. Whether you lose, the biggest issue with, I think, when it comes to majority of people, the biggest issue with the lactobacillus type and bifidobacteria type, and a number of the other beneficial bacteria, they are very susceptible to antibiotics. Glyphosate, which is a registered patented antibiotic, has antibiotic properties. So in that regard, I would say if you've been exposed to those things, you may want to do it for for a while. Depends on the circumstances. What's the type of things in your environment, the type of things, pathogens that may get into your system. It will be individual for different people. So I don't recommend it for people who are on a carnivore diet for some time as a blanket thing. It depends on circumstances. Have you been had certain, have you not resolved certain things, or you're in an environment where you're coming into you're being affected by certain pathogens of any sort? It depends. It's in that regard. But generally speaking, in our modern world, in our modern environment, and our modern diets, we tend to basically decimate the lactobacillus and a lot of the bifidobacteria and a number of other bacteria in our gut microbiome. We don't have the rich gut microbiomes that a lot of our ancestors had. So that's probably one reason. But if you're on a clean ancestral diet and you add those sort of things back, it makes a lot of difference in that regard. So it depends where you're at any stage. I hear a lot of discussions around hormone acne. What are your thoughts on how foods impact hormones in some way? Yeah, look, I've always talked about this sort of stuff, how different foods affect hormones and stuff like that. So it's nothing new when it comes to, even because I haven't done the video, but there's a methylation side to it also. Even your thyroid system and riboflavin plays a very important role in that as well. So it's not only some of the other stuff but riboflavin is a sort of it's not well known by many people that of its importance to the T3 production and general thyroid function. It's just one of those things. But if you're on an ancestral diet, meat has got shitloads of riboflavin, raw milk shitloads, so you can't go wrong on an ancestral diet. You should basically, if people got the diet right, I usually say, what else is there environmentally that may be triggering certain things, other things in your environment, pathogens, exposures to different chemicals or different things, agents that may be affecting your hormones or your endocrine system in general. So yeah, it varies. Your vitamin D status, also very important, because your whole hormonal immune system are dependent very clearly on things like vitamin D as well. So there's a lot of different elements. If you're as I said, out in the sun, eating salted steaks or salted animal foods, you should do quite well. That's a sort of a general thing, sort of a motherhood statement that I throw out there, but generally speaking, there's a lot of truth in it in that regard. So it's usually people flare up with, I used to get, when I consumed too much sugar, I used to get quite a bit. I didn't get acne on my face as an adult, but I used to get a lot of pimples all over my body. I mean, really quite a, even Mira used to look and go, what the fuck's wrong with you? So, yes. Thanks, mate. You're welcome. Also, this was a study on inulin and its potential benefits for gut microbiome. Oh, look, I think they're overstated. This sort of all this nonsense. Oh, you need inulin. Bullshit. I mean, Paul Mason's actually showed that study ages ago that actually looks into basically gut microbiome and and how well it produces different short chain fatty acids and stuff like that. And pretty much on a meat only, no plant diet, you pretty much actually have an elevation, a higher elevation of all the short chain fatty acids. The only one you don't actually have the same increase is acetone, but that's fine because that's the only one that has the potential to turn into sugar via the liver. So probably a good thing. So I don't see a downside on that one. And let alone on an ancestral diet, you'll also, produce some ketones and stuff like that. That can turn back to, short chain fatty acids by the body through enzymatic pathways that actually provide far more nutrition to, the gut itself. So I mean, it's a non-issue, all this sort of stuff. Waste of money and more likely to cause stomach issues than help in the long run. So give that a miss. Let the vegetards continue abusing their colons with that sort of shit. As if people 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago had inulin supplements in their drawer. Oh, those poor ancestors. How did they survive without inulin? Oh, yes, nothing like rapid fire. Get the questions out fast. Yes, it definitely did, Richard, definitely did. Actually, I've noticed that recently on my channel quite a bit of this. I'm getting really pissed off with YouTube here. I can't do anything about it. I complain and bitch and moan, and they don't even reply back to me. And sometimes they change things. Recently, I asked them to basically allow, because I had videos where I could put captions were allowed and others where captions weren't. And Kate actually mentioned it. And then I tried to change and it wasn't allowed. I actually went to another YouTube site and actually said, how do you actually fix this caption thing? And they all of them were just showing the same thing. And I'm going, well, I know that, because you just go into and you select the actual subtitling, and it'll actually give you the option. And I'm going, it's not giving me this. I'm going, oh. So I was getting a bit narky in that regard. They've just recently changed it, I noticed, so I can actually do the captions now on the one that she wanted. So I'll do that, but I won't be doing it on any others. It's just too fucking time consuming. But it does I've actually set it to auto generate. So what's happened is I actually had my name and then I changed it and shortened, and now you actually can see in brackets they put no BS opinion and all that, which is the old thing that I had ages ago. So they actually, I think they've reverted. They've done, I've got no idea. They didn't even tell me. They just did it, It's annoying. Sometimes I ask them to do one thing and they do something completely different. I'm going, why did you do that? Yes. So why would you do that? Yeah. So pretty much now I'll bring that up and I'll actually show you these bizarre sort of things that I'm getting anyway. So let me find it. Yep. Found it. Share. See, Tero put a question, put a comment here. Tero comment. Thank you, Harry. Very important. Very important. Again, the whole discussion here, which is the sort of recent one that I did, and he actually put the BitChute video for the whole thing, which is on BitChute. And when you actually go there, as you can see, it's been eliminated. So I had to literally go and actually put, this link is from Tero, YouTube removed it. The full video can be found here. So if people want to go and see it, which is really bloody annoying that YouTube keeps on doing this, you know, taking things out. And people are asking me, you know, did you remove? No, I haven't, you know. The only stuff that I actually remove is when somebody puts it like a pornographic, you know, like those sort of, they put a pornographic link, you know, certain people that I think they're just automatic things that they just generate and whatever. And I remove those because I don't want those on my site. And that's the only things that I actually remove. I don't remove anything else. I don't even remove vegan comments. When vegans come here and challenge me and actually put, you know, even nasty comments, I leave them and I just either answer them or just ignore them. But I don't get too wound up or upset about people's comments. You know, at the end of the day, people are going to say things, shit things or whatever. But, you know, the only time I will delete, I've deleted 2 vegan comments, but they actually were quite nasty. I mean, they were saying all sorts of things, you know, nasty things in my regards, or, you know, when they start saying things like they want you dead and they want you, you know, they start doing things like that, or saying they, you know, things about your family or whatever, you know, or, you know, you are evil people, or, you know, these sort of really wacko type things, I'll fuck them off, you know. I'll just keep them away from my, I don't actually delete their actual comment. I just delete them as able to put anything on my, you know, so I remove them completely. So gone, never to be seen. But they deserve that because they just basically, you know, come on, make a constructive criticism or put that. I mean, I even had Durian Rider. I remember once when I was with Bart and Durian Rider was using one of his, and Bart said, oh, don't answer that idiot. And I still answered his question, you know, and then I answered it so well, he had no comment after that and went away. So, you know, I don't mind answering people. I don't basically, but the thing is, I won't accept nastiness or people, these sort of, whatever they are, hackers or whatever, they actually put pornographic links to certain things because I don't want my subscribers being hooked in, or, you know, if you want to do it yourself, that's fine. But I don't want people to basically be directed towards content which these groups may be trying to extract money from them or whatever. So it's me doing something like a protective service in a sense, but that's about it. But, you know, I mean, these, you know, this BitChute sort of video is basically talking about people. They can't, because I pinned it, they can't get rid of it because I've actually put stuff on there. And I had actually pinned somebody else. I think it was Anthony. I can't remember now who I'd actually pinned, but I had to unpin them because you could only pin one comment. So sorry to the person that I unpinned, but I had to put this comment up here. And when I pin it, YouTube can't remove it. It's the only way I can do it because I've actually put stuff and links and they've removed them. Even mine on my own fucking channel. But when I pin it, it can't be removed because it would violate the rules because it's the channel person who's pinned something, they can't unpin it and remove it or stuff like that. So it works around the algorithm. It's not the most effective way, but it's, you know, maybe they could go in manually and remove it if they really want to get nasty. But you know, in this case they didn't. But who knows in the future what they may do. So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, which is a bit concerning, the way they're behaving. You know, they're just going around literally removing people's links and stuff like that. It's just unacceptable in my book. It's just gone too far. On one other point, on the featured channels, I've noticed that not many people have subscribed to Bart's new Institute of Scientific Integrity. And there's only, for the Smart Diabetics Academy, there's only 377. Guys, can you get on there and actually support Pim? She's doing great work and working so bloody hard on that site, putting out material every single, even putting out material more than I do and more than Bart does. And she's only got 377 subscribers. On the main one, she's got 101 over 1,000, nearly getting close to 2,000. But on the Smart Diabetics Academy, I mean, I know you may not have diabetes, you may not be interested, but it costs nothing to basically just support her. That's all you're doing. You don't have to go and look at anything or whatever. Just subscribe, please, and support it. It's on my featured channels. So if you go to my channel, you will basically go to the featured ones. There you go. I'll actually put it there. There's my channel. I'll even bloody pin it there right at the top. People can just go right down to the featured channels and click on Smart Diabetic Academy and the Institute of Scientific Integrity. If you haven't, please do. It costs you nothing. You know, these people are doing hard work, are working hard to try and get messages out and do work. You know, the least they can get is some support from people. I know maybe most people that are on at the moment have already subscribed, but those who will listen to this at a later time slot, please do. You know, it's important that we support good channels. Anyway, now getting back to the questions. When I discuss tie-ups in regards to time, I think YouTube suspects something nefarious, idiots or whatever. Yeah, look, who knows? I've just really lost. Good for you, Richard. Let me know if you want to come on. Send me a message. I'll send me an email and a message so I'm aware, because I do have the other side of the chat running, so I can see what is the latest stuff that pops up. But yes, that's me setting up. Yes, me saying hi to everyone. Let's move on from that person. Yes, thanks, Richard. G'day, Deborah. You're keen? Okay. Send me an email and I will send you an invite. You know where my email is. You get it from the About page. Anyway, we will move on until Richard sends me through an email. G'day, Dylan. Did I miss Mouse? Where's Mouse? Oh, I mean, yes, you mean Richard. Vivid Mouse. There is another Mouse as well. She's not here yet. Okay. Dinelle, good to see you here. Yes, you did. You finally made a live one. Tanks, good to see you. Harry, you recommended malic acid since I'm having some trouble with when I up the fat. Is this good for stones only or gallbladder health in general? Yeah, look, it's good in softening the stones. But you also need taurine, because taurine also actually helps with the emulsification. So it actually makes it, by emulsifying the bile salts, it makes for better, what's the word to use, flow better through the bile ducts is the sort of word that I'm trying to use. So I usually do recommend a combination of malic acid and taurine, and obviously if you're on blood pressure meds, as always with taurine, you step it up slowly, not fast. Very important, and adjust your meds if you have to. I just need to make that, because it's a medical interaction. So I have to cover that point. Do no harm, as they say. Ox bile when having very high fat meals. Yeah, it's probably a good idea initially, as you're still, because it takes like a number of months, to basically improve the flow generally and all that. And you will get sort of variations in stool color as well as this is happening. It's just one of those unfortunate things. Don't go too heavy on the ox bile. You may end up with a bit of diarrhea. So just keep that in mind. Can be it's a question of, as I've always said, go slow with these things. Don't go fast. I actually did notice a really nice comment. There was, let me bring Richard, a Russian doctor who actually left a comment on one of my videos, and he actually said that he had done a lot of, like operations and stuff like that, and he agreed with me that go slow. None of these, gallbladder flushes and all that, a number of people end up in hospital with stones stuck in their bile ducts or in their pancreas and causing themselves all sorts of grief. So you want to basically emulsify, soften these up, and allow them to smoothly go through without a lot of effort. The same thing happened to Alex with taurine and all that. It slowly came out and it was painless for him. So he was very happy with that result. So Alex is from the Netherlands, and he had similar issues, but it takes time. You've got to be patient. I've been there myself and enjoyed a few interesting days. In British Isles, breakfast meats are virtually all pork-based. Deserves more respect. Exactly. Yeah, precisely. Look, for the majority of humanity, pork's an easy thing to have in the backyard. Most people used to lard pigs. Most people used to have pork belly and all sorts of treats of pork. Throughout many parts of Asia, many parts of the world, pork was very much a favorite thing. It's only in parts of the Middle East, because of the climate, and because pigs could actually contaminate water holes, which are very important for the camels to have clean water and stuff like that. That's why they were considered like a pest. So for the Arabs, and that's where all this anti-pig culture that comes from the Muslim world has nothing to do really with the religion, because it also exists in the Orthodox faith of Ethiopia. The Ethiopians, who are Orthodox faith as well, they also circumcise, and they're also against. There's Richard.
Hey.
Good to see you, mate.
Yeah, the same.
And
can you hear me okay, Harry?
What's that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. I'm fine. I hope others can. Just they can actually put in the comments if they can't. There's some sort of like a bzzz in the background. Is that some sort of, you're running some sort of little fan device or whatever?
It's a bit too close to my computer and I can't really do much about it, unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And what I was saying is that the I think the Eritreans as well. So you've got the Eritreans, you've got the Afar people, you've got the Ethiopians, you've got the Somalis, all those in the Horn of Africa. They do a lot of similar things, even though they're not of the same faith. The Southern Sudanese do the same thing, and they're Christians. So all these groups are basically avoiding pork, and because you don't want pork or swine to get into water holes where you want to provide water for humans and for camels. So I think that's where culturally it comes from, and it's again because circumcising your penis actually reduces the viral load that can actually or different pathogens under the penis. And if you take a look at like HIV levels in Africa, circumcised societies have lower rates, again for similar reasons, of certain types of sexually transmitted diseases. So these are cultural things, and then eventually they became part of the religious tradition. So that's the reason why it's just that a lot of people don't have that cultural knowledge anymore, or the historical knowledge, to be more precise, and that's where the disconnect comes. But the majority of humanity, right back to the chimps and the early hominins, they actually consumed quite a lot of small swine, wild boar and piglets and stuff like that, because that was much easier to catch in their environment. As they got bigger and more better at hunting, then they sort of moved up to the bigger stuff, including mammoths. And, they also utilized dogs, or in Australia, dingoes, to basically make them more effective hunters of bigger game. So that's pretty much it in that regard. So, yeah, look, pork's been around for ages. I never could understand why it got demonized in the first place. But again, I blame the paleo community for that. And even though I do have friends who are in the paleo community, I still blame them and call them a whole lot of connotations and cockwombles, anti-pork cockwombles and stuff like that. And I think that's fair enough. Wouldn't you say, Richard?
Sorry, Harry, I was busy trying to adjust my volume. And
that's fine. That's fine. You do what you need to do, and then I'll bring you into the conversation.
I heard cockwombles, though.
Then you heard right. I don't take donations, so don't worry about that. I make enough money. So don't need your money. If I've got time to answer, I'll answer at my time, at my leisure. I do this as a hobby help type thing. But yes, the only people that I'd like to extract money from is YouTubia. That's about it. So taking back money from them would put a smile on my face, not because I need it, but because I'm taking it from them. G'day, Reich. Good to see you, mate. Nice helmet. Very medieval of you. Nope, that's not going to happen, Richard.
Oh, I know, but we care, Harry. We care.
I know, but I'm not going to be doing that. Yes, that's me. Look, if YouTube was my regular thing, and this was my, like with Bart and things like this, was my income and stuff like that, my livelihood, I don't begrudge people that do that in that regard. But it's not my motivation for being here. Because let's put it this way, I've made more money on shares. I've made more money on, on the real estate and other things and other equities than basically I would ever make on a platform like this. It wouldn't be worth my time for money, basically. So I would not waste my time. The amount of money that I could make, let's put it this way. The amount of money I made on one property 1 year, it wasn't even 1 year, it was in a couple of months, but anyway, was more than probably I would make in a decade on YouTube and multiple times beyond that. So as you can understand, it's a waste of time in that regard. So that's not my motivation, so to speak, why I'm here. It's completely different. Now, Harry, how much concern should there be over ingesting red sauce? If you use lactoferrinate, you mean lactoferrin? That's what you mean? Is it safe as an occasional treat? So you're going to use one of my biohacks with lactoferrin supplementation, mate, are you, Lukey? You bad boy. Remember, it's like, you can always just use raw animal blood. Same thing. Season it with a...
How are you planning on fermenting tomatoes?
Who knows what he's doing. You can... I know Dad used to basically... Because, like pickled cucumbers and stuff like that, you can do something similar. You take the skins off, you take all the actual... and you can actually get a bacterial culture like they do with cheeses, and you can actually put it into and make a sort of a fermented tomato. I know in Greece, in some of the mountains, they've done with certain plants, they've actually used cultures, which is the lactobacillus type cultures, which they get from the goats. And they've actually used that to culture into these sort of fermented vegetables, which they consume in the winter months. So there is a bit of that sort of stuff. So yeah, you could probably do that, but I've got to the stage in life I go to myself, I can get all the nutrients that I really want from the animal foods. Why bother going to all this trouble? And if I need to get some additional, I just do a kefir now and then. So I may do a kefir for about a couple of weeks every year, and I probably will get a very good amount of these lactobacillus type bacterial strains. So I can't see the value of it. What about you, Richard? What do you think?
What was that, Harry?
What do you think about utilizing these methods of fermenting things when you could...
Well, I think I've already spoken to you about my problem with dairy. But when I ferment it, and I ferment it until it can't ferment anymore, my kefir, I have no problems with it at all.
Yeah.
Otherwise, exactly. It goes straight through me and gives me diarrhea.
Yeah. It's because basically I'm lactose intolerant in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that.
So it's eating up all the lactose, and therefore, yeah. It's
look. I've known that certain people can take lactobacillus type strains, and over time, if they have raw milk, and they also are able to build up sufficient of the change slightly the structure of the gut microbiome, they seem to be able to tolerate it. So they don't have the genetics, but they seem to get enough of the sort of the lactase enzymes and to be able to deal with it, as long as they're not over consuming the stuff. So there's variations between people in that regard. So it's oops, there's Lukey. G'day, Luke.
Hey, Luke. Good stuff.
I just noticed a private comment and I go, oh, there's another person there. I'll just remove. Let me just stop that. We don't need that part. They can go. Yeah. So, what were you talking? What are you planning to do, young man?
Oh, the tomatoes and stuff. Well, I'm slowly phasing out the red sauce, but I've been thinking about I've seen this done. I think with blueberries, where they would do some sort of dry fermentation. So basically, you get the weight in base vegetable, and you add 2.5% salt to that, and there's no brine actually. You just add the vegetable and the salt, and you occasionally mix it up. And what will happen is the salt will draw out the fluids, and that will begin lacto fermentation as well. So what can happen actually, I think that's possible. The tomato will slowly become a paste by themselves, and also that paste will already be lacto fermented as well. I think that would be, less egregious to consume than traditional paste.
Yeah, it probably would be in that regard. That's true. But I've never tried it. I know Dad has done stuff like that, where he ferments different stuff and creates them into a sauce type thing. the Italians for a long time, like when they had access to tomatoes in the first place, for 20, I think it was 20 or 30 years, they sold them to everyone else in Europe, but they never used them themselves. They were really, because they knew how bad they were for the gut. But then they actually came up with getting rid of all the lectins and fermenting them and creating tomato paste the way traditionally they created in that regard. So it is slightly fermented in that regard in that way with salt. But I have heard of other things as well that people have done where they've used, like not for tomatoes, but other sort of vegetables, where they've actually used from goats the bacterial sort of strains, and then they've basically added them to the actual these fermented stuff, and they've preserved them, like you do with all that sort of stuff. But of tomatoes, no. It's probably, look, let me put it this way. While Greeks use tomatoes, they definitely serve it up to tourists quite a bit on the islands and all that, because that's what people want. And cucumbers are served up without having their skin removed, which horrifies me, because I remember in the 70s and 80s as a youngster when I used to go to like an Uzedi. An Uzedi is a place that they actually sell alcohol, and only alcohol, spirits like ouzo and stuff like that. It's called an Uzedi, which is a spirit shop. And the spirit store basically used to bring you out a small little tray, and they would have the alcohol there, the little container that actually had it of cipro, which is like grappa. We call it cipro. Or they would have, and the nice thing about it, I was 15 and I could still go there and actually buy it and actually drink it. So it's not in Greece, it's especially if you're in small towns, people know you. I used to leave school, and after I left school, before I went home, I'd drop into the Uzedi, have a shot of cipro, have a small little, and then go home. So but that's normal. I never abused alcohol, because it was just part of the normal cultural thing. So I never sort of, I'm not a binge drinker, so to speak, in that regard, and I've never really understood why people binge drink. I've drunk more than I should have on occasions, but I've never sort of deliberately gone out of my way to get drunk. It's never been in my sort of psyche, but it's probably because of the way I was brought up culturally, where alcohol was consumed at home. You could go into an Uzedi and actually have some without anybody, making an issue of it. It was normal. Even one of my uncles, who was a police officer, would turn up sometimes and have a drink with me, and I was 15, so it wasn't an issue.
We were discussing tomatoes, and I just had a thought. Does sun-drying tomatoes have an impact?
Yes, they do that on the islands. On the Greek islands, they'll actually sun-dry tomatoes. I've actually seen it done. My younger sister's mother-in-law, she's passed away now, she used to do it. She used to lay it all out and would actually open up the actual tomatoes and expose them to the UV for the whole day, and they would dry out, and then she would get all the seeds and pull away all the skins as they dried out, and she would just allow it to dry it, and then at a certain level where it's not completely dry, then she would actually use that and put them in sort of a jar, and she would have those for winter months. So yeah, that tradition still exists on a lot of the Greek islands. The island that I actually saw it for the first time being done, because it's not done on the west coast. We pickle type things. We don't sun dry things. But this was Milos in the Cyclades, which is southeast of Athens, if that sort of gives you a geographical position. So the Cyclades are, if anybody knows the Minoan civilization, they were related to that. So they're sort of in the sort of the western part of the Aegean. And if you know where Crete is, sort of centrally, to the north of that as you're heading towards, but not as high as where Athens is, slightly further down. So it's a chain of islands, and it's from antiquity. It's got a lot of a lot of mining happened in Milos in particular. So Milos was a very big mining sort of area, and there was people sort of used to move even in Neolithic periods. They used to actually sail between the mainland and take different types of stone to the mainlanders. So it was, so seafaring in the Aegean has been happening for a very long time. It's probably the reason why Greece today, even today, to this day, has got the biggest merchant navy in the world for that reason. So it's in our blood, so to speak, the sea.
So this is why people need to listen to their elders. They have interesting stories, and your parents, grandparents, etc. If people listen to their elders, they'd learn all this stuff.
That's it. Yeah, that's where I learned it. I didn't learn it from actual books. A lot of it, actually, a lot of these stories about even stories of the past, war times, all sorts of things. It's all from these people who actually lived these experiences. When they actually say things like the blessing of the weapons of the rebels, they literally had to, let's say, pressure the bishop to bless the weapons, say no more. Now in the textbooks they say how it's completely rewritten, mythologized, and so to speak, but some of my great grandparents were there because they were captains in one of the rebel general's army, so they know exactly what they saw it with their own eyes, so that's come through the family line, so we know it. So some academic tells me, I go, what? Fuck off, you idiot. I've actually got it from the horse's mouth going way back. Traditions, whether it's food traditions, whether it's cultural traditions, whether it's understanding an environment, all come from people who have direct knowledge, have tactile knowledge of those things, and can actually transmit that over time. And if you're willing to listen, you can learn a lot. More than you can learn in some books, which tend to mythologize, as I say. They tend to, let's say, glorify things, or let's say, change them in a way where we would like them to be, but not how they were really.
My nana used to tell stories about the deep breathing exercises she was made to do during the war. And not many people know about that, but now you've got Wim Hof.
Yeah,
and so you've come full circle,
Yeah, it is crazy like that it's taken so long for people to realize how to breathe, or how our ancestors really breathe properly. And some of the actual, sometimes I say, how many times do we have to reinvent the wheel? Because that knowledge gets lost. It's not that it was, it's like the low carb diet, going right back to Banting. And if you go even before Banting, there were other people as well. It actually goes right back, even in ancient Greece. If you had diabetes, they used to recommend a low-carb diet. This is how crazy it is, how far back. How many times do we have to retell the story? Sometimes I go, it's just because people are not listening to their elders, learning and transmitting that information forward. And it gets lost between certain generations. And in particular today, it's horrifying how unfashionable it's become to listen to elders or to listen to other wisdoms or knowledge. So it's unfortunate where the world is. Now, is high insulin drives fluids into the muscles? Might this, to some degree, dehydrate other tissue? The dynamics of, look, in terms of fluid retention, insulin plays a role, but in terms of dehydration, it's more to do with the mitochondrial level. That means, what are you eating? and the depletion rate. So you may be losing. So people who eat more carbohydrates tend to urinate more. They tend to dehydrate more because you produce less metabolic water, because that's the whole purpose of mitochondria. We just get the energy as a byproduct of we use their shit, their byproduct of energy, of water production, which is ADP synthase, to basically provide energy for our cells. But ultimately, ATP is the main game. That's for us. For them, it's actually metabolic water, because it actually creates a better transistor effect, and the way water separates within the mitochondria creates that better transistor type effect or electrical state. But getting away from that sort of quantum biology, getting back to this, I've always said is sugar dehydrates because it only produces about 0.44% of metabolic water, where fat, on the other hand, produces 10% more, 1.1, sorry. So that's the difference. So basically, in terms of hydration, now getting back to insulin, you don't need insulin to drive basically muscle protein synthesis. So obviously, if you inject a lot of insulin, as a lot of athletes do, they do create these irregular type of growths of water, of sucking fluids into the muscles and making them look perky and larger. And there's a number of other anabolic peptides that you can use for the same purpose, which are probably slightly safer than insulin in that regard. But should you be doing that? If you're not basically like one of those top weightlifting, one of those top sort of bodybuilder type of competition type person, who are probably a handful in the world, why are you doing it? The rest of it, nobody else needs it. And it actually has a deleterious effect on the actual muscle fibers. You actually want muscle fibers not to be, you want them to be packed, compact, and more efficient and stronger. So you don't want them separated. And that's the reason why bodybuilders look more bulkier, but they don't have the same strength as weightlifters. So I would say, yeah, you're basically whipping a dead horse going that pathway, unless you basically are in competition. Ultimately, what you want is leucine. Leucine is the thing that actually will increase, independent of insulin, will increase muscle protein synthesis. I've done the experiments. It's a done deal. It's, as Bart would say, it's a slam dunk. It's done. The reality is, just because I haven't done the video yet, I'll get around to that at some stage. I've got other priorities. But basically, leucine independent is all you need. And you don't need as much insulin either. When you're actually just eating a steak, you're only getting an insulin to glucagon of 1.3, very low. In catabolic levels, we're looking at fasting 0.8. So you don't need massive amounts. You just need a certain amount for muscle protein synthesis. But a lot of people have jumped on this bandwagon of insulin, anabolic steroids and stuff like that, and they are shortening their lives. Most of the current bodybuilders are actually dying in their 30s and in their 40s. Please don't do it. Please don't put your life at risk. There are much better ways. You want high quality protein? The highest utilization protein, 49% utilization, is in eggs. Eat shitloads of eggs. The old bodybuilders used to consume up to 40 eggs a day. Shitloads. With dairy, is very anabolic because it's got a lot of branched chain amino acids, a lot of the dairy. So you combine the two, you'll get a lot of anabolic effects without actually having to put yourself at great risk of the other sort of stuff. And then if you want long periods of muscle protein synthesis, usually combine eggs, which is the casein part, the cheeses and stuff like that, which is the casein part, because cheeses are much higher in casein. You combine cheeses with steaks and stuff like that, and some eggs as well in there, and all that together will actually provide muscle protein synthesis way beyond that of powders. Powders are high in deuterium, very bad for the mitochondria in terms of efficiency. In the long term, you'll lose out. And the other thing is powders also are devoid of a lot of the peptides and the other components you find in actual food that the muscles need. So you're basically really not providing good quality. And at the end of the day, most of it actually gets unutilized. It's actually as bad as plant protein, which is about 17% of what you would get. And I can't remember the study now, but I saw something that actually showed some of the protein powders to being down at 13 or 15, even below plant protein. This is why people take these massive smoothies and they have all these gut problems and all that. And I'm going, why the hell do you do it? Just eat real food like the old bodybuilders did. And they remained lean. They remained quite muscular and lean without having to do all these crazy cuts where they do these crazy cuts pre-competition. They come out of competition and they look like they've put on how many kilos. They look really bad. So it's not the way to live. That's my opinion anyway. And the evidence actually shows that continuously. You have to only take a look at some of the snapshots they take of these people. Don't look good. We should write a book. Yes, that's a lot of effort. Ask Bart. He's got plenty of time, apparently. I usually say, when are you going to write your book? He says, oh, fuck it, I've got too much on my plate. I said, well, what do you think I have?
But the infographics, though, that's a good idea because people love sharing stuff like that around. Especially there's like those sacred cow infographics. Those became so popular.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's probably food for thought. Thank you, Lukey, for adding more to my plate. Oh, this is interesting. I wonder if there's a bigger terrain component in dengue, and your thoughts. Bitten by mosquitoes, seasonal dengue, but never got sick. Vitamin D more than anything else. I think more, I notice that people that get sicker in parts of Southeast Asia is with dengue in particular. I notice it's more women than men. So women actually avoid the sun more than men in Indonesia. Obviously, they want lighter skin, and it's all about that sort of stuff. And they tend to be more vitamin D deficient, and they tend to be more sickly compared to men for the exact same reason. And look, even Mira, she's the same. And I basically shake my head and okay, you're a crazy woman.
Yeah, it's quite common in Asia, isn't it? Where they want to be as pale as possible because it equates with beauty.
Yep. Because that's what they see constantly on TV. That's what they see, And here's the rest of us, trying to cook ourselves to get a tan.
Yeah, you don't see the flip side.
Yeah, and she goes, "Are you crazy?" Now you know why I gave up on the whole idea of getting a tan again. I used to have a beautiful tan when I was a youngster in Greece. But then when I got back to Tasmania, I lost it. It's too bloody cold down here to sunbathe, let alone the sea. Even in summer, guys, I'm not kidding you. I mean, Richard knows, New Zealand's pretty much the same in the Southern Islands. If you basically go into the ocean, it's fucking cold. You can forget about sunbaking, or sunbaking, yes, but forget about swimming in our waters. Even you have to put a swimsuit on, actual stuff like that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, especially in where I am in Wellington, because if you jump into the beach here, you've got the cold water that goes through the strait between the two islands. And it's very cold. And when I was living in the South Island, the water was warmer. So I used to swim in the sea.
Really?
It's to do with ocean currents, I think. I used to live in Dunedin for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
And I would love to get into the ocean, but not in Wellington, stuff that.
So the actual ocean currents that are coming from the tropics actually go through the southern island, past the southern part of the southern island.
I don't know. Dunedin, you would think, because it's close to the, closer to the bottom of the South Island, with the actual currents, they do rotate from the poles and do rotate from the tropics as well. So maybe it's certain interactions or certain places, because it is on an angle. New Zealand's slightly on an angle, so it may be getting. Yeah, it could be. Because you and I are about the same, on the map, Wellington, Tasmania, give or take. So I don't know what it is about Dunedin. I mean, it's obviously much further down, warmer in the ocean.
It could be because of that, the current circulation. There may be the way. It may be, who knows? I can't remember now because it's been a while. I know that basically when you look at the tropical zone, it's where halfway through the Arab Peninsula, halfway through India, and then it's below that. It gets into parts of Australia and all that. And when you flip like Tasmania, it's basically close to the Mediterranean nearly, but it doesn't have that climate because we've got a massive southern ocean. We've got no other land mass to protect us, to insulate us from the Antarctica. Maybe because Tasmania gets a full brunt directly. We don't really, where as those air masses are sort of moving through Australia and getting to New Zealand, maybe you're getting some of our good weather. Maybe we should be billing the Kiwis for some of this good weather.
No, come on now.
That'll upset your prime minister, won't it?
Oh well, don't get me started on her.
We'll have to send her a few more criminals over.
It's like politics, religion, and sport.
Yeah, I know.
Tend to create arguments.
Yes, they do. You got to keep away from them.
Yep.
Yes, very true. Very true. There are people that will methylate, hypermethylators. There are people that actually have different methylation rates. Whether the word hypermethylator is appropriate,
I think they term it over-methylation or something.
Yeah, I think it's over-methylation. Yeah, rather than hypermethylation. I've never heard of the word hypermethylation. Unless anybody else has heard, they've changed the terms, but it's usually over-methylation or under-methylation. That usually is the common word. But no, I haven't heard of something like hypermethylation, unless somebody else has come up with a new buzzword in the naturopathic world. That does happen now and then, and I do miss some of this sort of stuff because when I listen to some of them, my eyes roll over. For them, a vitamin is basically the silver bullet. For the MD, it's the drug. So yes, all rather than actually just saying, just go back to an ancestral diet, eat properly, do a couple of biohacks here or there, and you'll be fine beyond that point. But we have to sell you expensive stuff for the rest of your life, because that's the only way we can monetize the whole thing and make money. Oh, look, I can understand some people in those sort of professions and stuff like that, but I say that there are other better ways. They can become teachers, where, like some of the Chinese people, doctors, they didn't get paid for dealing with people. They got paid for healing people. So if you healed somebody, you got paid. If you didn't, you didn't. So it was basically they had to be involved in the community, had to assess what things cause the issues to try and avert them or prevent them, find causal things, where today most doctors are just basically trying to manage conditions. And naturopaths do the same thing. They manage conditions. They don't try and heal people. We don't have healers anymore, in a sense. is what I'm saying, you know. And that's what we used to have traditionally. We used to have the shaman who was a healer of the tribe, did as much as they knowledge that they had at the time, but they were actually attempting to heal, not to medicate and not to basically keep people going in a chronic condition. So it's a completely different mindset.
It comes back to building on the knowledge of your elders again, doesn't it, really?
It does.
Mm.
It fundamentally does come down to that. And we've lost that. We've had food culture taken away from us by the food industry. Traditional therapeutic methods taken away by the pharmaceutical MD, ND, naturopath sort of environment. And we're just treated as dummies. We will tell you as high priests of these things, and you will comply to what we tell you. And I just usually say, now let's take a look what's happening in the society. You're not doing pretty good, you guys.
That was in response to your hair, Harry.
Oh, well, fair enough.
Would have been easier. Just put a hat on, then you don't have to worry about it.
I've got genetics. I've got genetics that, and I out the sun more, so kind of. And actually, in the evening, it doesn't look as bad as but that's because the sun comes right through the window that I'm here and actually shines and actually makes it worse. So I can't win. When I'm at work, because I'm away from the actual window, it looks much better, even in daytime. But when I'm, look, I don't mind. I don't have issues like that. My friends keep on saying, why don't you put some colour through? So does Mira. And I go, no.
No, it's losing better once you get to, this.
Well, the thing is, there's a theory going out there. I'm not going to say I've ever found enough evidence to confirm it or not. But usually, like when Obama became president, his hair went grey very quickly. Now, grey hair, then basically even stress would cause, because people do get stressed and their hair doesn't go grey.
Mm.
And they think it may be a genetic adaptation. As you get older and wiser, your hair goes grey, because we see this with like certain, what do they call the grey, those monkeys that have got grey hair there. I forget what their name is.
Just giving you a heads up, Harry, I've got a visitor that's about to disturb me, so I may end up dropping off for a bit.
Yeah, that's fine. You've got the link. You can come back on.
Okay.
Does anybody remember the grey-haired monkey type thing?
Oh God, not the word. I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, that exactly thing, as it gets older, it goes grey and it has more respect from others. So greyness does infer respect, apparently. So maybe that's what's happening. Maybe I got wiser and automatically I got greyer. Well, I'm using that as an excuse. It's working for me for currently, So, but it is a theory that somebody threw out there. It's a hypothesis. It's probably a wacky hypothesis because there's probably specific genetics for that species. But I'll use it for the time being. It's another weapon you can use against young people. When they say, I'm wiser than you, that's why. When you go grey, then you can actually, we can have a conversation of equals. Yeah, I know. I know how to upset my nieces and nephews and many others. Yeah. Well, somebody has to. Were you saying before, Harry, that some Asian groups are better without salt? I said that there are some populations around the world that seem to have an adaptation to be able to tolerate less salt. Some people, to some degrees and all that, or have better salt retention because they've lived in hotter climates in that regard. But it doesn't actually mean if they salt restrict, that they actually live longer. it's actually been found that people that salt restrict don't live longer. So that it's not that, but it means that they can tolerate lower salt levels compared to other people, but it's not necessarily healthy just because you can tolerate something, you know. And when you look at populations around the world, even Asian populations and stuff like that, take a look at the Japanese and the Koreans that live very long. They consume quite a lot of sodium. They're some of the highest sodium consumers. Most Asians that have long life have some of the highest sodium consumptions. You know, there have been studies on the Koreans in particular. They bloody hell that do they salt their food. So I would say that the opposite in terms of health and longevity, but in terms of being able to tolerate lower salt, I would say the Asians probably have a more, especially the people around the tropics, probably better, where it's probably because, you know, Northern Europeans in particular, we probably tend to basically sweat far more, you know, in comparison in that regard, because we've got less adaptation to these hotter climates. So it's probably that when we go to the tropics, we lose a lot of salt. I tend to. I had one case where my heart rate was so, like my thumping out of my chest, my heart. I literally had to go down to the lobby area in the hotel and literally ask for salt. And I got salt off these people, and I started putting it in the glasses of water, just drinking glass of water with salt. And my heart rate came down. About half an hour later, I was able to go back to sleep. So, yeah. And that was because I was so dehydrated and I'd lost so much salt, and I hadn't had much salt in the day. And I tend to sweat like mad because I've sort of mentioned it before. I've got like hypothermia genes, and I tend to sweat even in winter. Like I will power walk to work in winter, get to work, and I'll have basically sweated, you know. And people know, they know me at work. They go, "Oh, power walking, Harry?" Yeah. So, you know, it's my usual thing. But I do cool down pretty fast after that. So once I sit down, I cool down pretty fast, and I'm fine after that all day. I'm not sweating in the office, so to speak. But when I actually move rapidly, I really heat up quite a bit. So, you know, that's, you know, and I will lose a lot of. And so when you're actually in the tropics, you tend to be active, you move around, you do things. So, and in my case, I will sweat at a higher rate than others. So in that regard. So that's, yeah. What about you, Lukey? What's your sweat rate like?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's on the higher side as well. And to be honest, I've always been known as someone that really enjoys salty foods. But the thing is, I feel like I can deal with the heat really well, because I'll start sweating profusely, but I actually, that actually makes me feel comfortable. And over time, that's why I enjoy sportswears like this, because my natural rate of sweating, it's enough to keep me cool, like even throughout summer and things like that.
Yep. Well, that's good. Yeah, that's good in that regard. And you know, you've probably got some because you've got mixed genes, as you've said, some ancestral there, local Indian, but also you've got European, which basically means that you've probably got those as well. So you don't know, but I suspect a lot of people in the sort of tropical areas and all that tend to sweat less. That's what I've noticed, even Southeast Asia, amongst Southeast Asians, where people further away from the tropics, it doesn't matter which racial group they are, when they do go to the tropics, they tend to sweat because just of that adaptation, and tend to have a higher requirement for sodium in those sort of conditions. So, yeah, I suspect there's a bit of that to do with it. And there's what I was trying to say at the time is that they can sort of, because they don't sweat as profusely as us, they tend to have lower requirements. Maybe I didn't explain it properly at the time. I just said it in general that Southeast Asians tend to require less salt, but I didn't explain the reasons. So
there's something, I need to look this up again, but like some people in the paleo community, they tend to be against salt for some reason. And usually they will refer to studies on Brazilian natives in the Amazon.
Yep.
Yeah, and say things like, look, this population only ingested like 2 grams of sodium a day, like something really small. And they'll say, oh, look, they were fine. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
there may
but
be
they
something to that, but
but they seem to forget that also these populations, there's no longevity in them.
yeah, precisely, yes.
None of these, and we're not talking about average life expectancy, because we know that's confounded with infant mortality and other things and accidents and all that. We're actually talking about actual centenarians in their groups don't exist. That's clear. They've never, and I've called them, even because I've, like academics and stuff like that, and I said, well, you show me within those populations a centenarian, and everything goes very quiet. I mean, dead quiet. Say no more. Where most of the other populations that consume a lot of salt tend to have centenarians amongst themselves. Okinawans, Ikaria in Greece. Greeks love salt. They use a lot of it, shitloads of it. The Sardinians, even the Costa Ricans consume a bit of salt compared to many other populations in that region. So, but you don't see it amongst some tribal groups that tend to consume also higher carbohydrates, and also tend to lean animals, and tend to basically have lower longevity. Simple as that. High deuterium. Well, and it depends. If they're in the jungle, they're not getting as much deuterium depletion as well, which is another factor. There are so many variations. Sometimes it's so hard. Is it basically the lack of deuterium depletion because they're in the jungle, because they're not in an open savanna to get enough deuterium depletion from the diet that they're actually consuming? There are, you know what I mean? It just adds on to the complexity all the time. That's why I say that that you will find so many variations amongst population groups because of all these varied components. The dietary, some of the micronutrient or seasoning aspects of the diet, plus the exposure to the sun at different times. There are, if you're not getting also the red light spectrums early in the morning and later in the evening, sufficient of that also has a therapeutic value. So what I'm trying to say is that there can be so many variables that it's very hard to pin these things down. But what I've noticed in general when it comes to salt, when we look around the world, you don't find low salt consuming populations that have got centenarians amongst them. Simple as that.
Yes.
So I still haven't found one. I've looked, don't get me wrong, I've looked. And if somebody has any information on centenarians that are low salt consumers anywhere in the world, please let me know. I'd love to know.
Yeah. And Harriet, and like if you look at the, like, at least from what I know here, like the tribes and stuff, you can find all sorts of things, like all sorts of diets. Some tribes were nearly vegetarian or something because of beliefs they had or something like that. But the meanest, the most famous tribes, they were actually heavy into drinking blood. They drank lots of blood.
Which is sodium.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is the other thing, that maybe these people have got the wrong message, that basically these people do consume blood from the animals that they kill, and they're not measuring that.
Yes, so, that's what I think as well.
See, a lot of people say, like Mary, remember what she said? Oh, the Maasai don't consume salt, and they don't. We know that they don't, but they get it from blood. They mix it up in there because, you know what? If they weren't, they'd be fucked, because the animal foods have more potassium compared to sodium, and milk is very high in potassium compared to any other animal food. It's the highest in potassium. So when you combine all those, if they weren't consuming basically blood with the actual, they would have basically a sodium deficiency, and they would be in real strife. But they don't, because they consume blood, and so they get more than enough in that regard. So they don't need to go out and purchase salt or find salt or whatever. You know, all animals require salt. You see, they go to riverbeds and all that and lick salt. You know, they go around. All animals seek out. I mean, even farmers know that they put salt blocks out for the animals to lick. But, you know, animals know, you know, and you have to sometimes, you know, if I've used too much salt, I'll go, I don't need any more. I've used too much, you know. Listen to your body. It'll tell you if something seems salty. You know, I've sometimes used less salt and it feels like salty, the food, because it's winter, I'm not sweating, and I'm getting plenty of salt. And then sometimes in summer, I could have the same food and I could have put shitloads of salt, and it's still, I'm going, this isn't salty enough. I'm still trying to put more. It's because my body's saying I need more. You know, it requires more, and that's the only reason. So I would say, listen to your body. AG, Lake Deborah is one of them. They actually do harvest from the same area, but the brand that I get is a different one. It's called Lake Salt. It's not called Lake Deborah. It's called Lake Salt, the actual brand name, but I cannot remember the exact, because I don't have any. I threw out the package, so I can't remember exactly. I know what it looks like when I see it, because I go to the IGA store and buy it, but I just, you know, off the top of my head, I just can't remember it, you know, what it's called. I've shown it before, you know, you've seen it before. So it's, yeah, maybe I should do a specific video. When I buy, that's what I'll do. Next time I'll buy, I'll do a specific one on Aussie salt. There you go. Don't expect me to do an international one. God almighty, that's too much research. But I'll do one for the for Aussie salt, and I will basically provide it for the Aussie audience, and that's pretty much it. So, yep, I'm discriminating for the locals. So be it.
This stuff is complicated. I'm just using refined salt, honestly.
Look, a lot of people have in the past, in the 50s and 60s and all that, and none of them had any health issues whatsoever. So it's not as bad as some people say. The problem is that they were eating more animal food, so they were getting a lot of the other the trace minerals. The problem is most people, you know, a carnivore that actually eats good quality meat probably will get enough of the trace minerals to not really require specific salts in that regard, you know. But the modern people, you know, people that are doing vegan, vegetarian diets or any other sort of sad diet, they are definitely going to be deficient in a lot of these minerals. And so they probably need a high quality salt even more than we do, in a sense. That's probably true to some extent. But for optimal, I prefer using, you know, sort of natural, for the simple reason that the ionics will be much better preserved and all that, and also the other mineral component, trace minerals that are in there, you know, provide a better balance of what the body needs. So that's probably one thing. But then again, as I said, you can actually use a colloidal mineral type supplement to get trace elements of minerals. So there are a whole lot of options. I usually use the trace elements occasionally when I'm fasting. That's when I use them for fasting purposes. So when I'm not fasting, it just stays in the fridge, my mineral supplement, and I don't use it. But when I hit fasting, I do add a bit in with the salt water, and that's pretty much what I use. But yeah, when vegetarians say that there were adapted carbs due to our activities since Neolithics, how would you respond to even evidence of genetic changes? Well, look, in recent times, we've acquired some level of tolerance to carbohydrates and adaptations, and not to the actual sugar part, that we've had since for a long time. It's basically to the actual other elements like lectins and phytates and all this, to other compounds. So we've acquired some differing adaptations between people of some of the anti-nutrient and other components that we react to in a negative way. So some populations have acquired some level of adaptation, others more than others, depending on the exposure over time. So that's just a tolerance to certain things. Also, we combined a lot of, in populations, and especially, when you look at Europe and Asia and, places like India, a lot of those places use a lot of dairy. So let's not forget. And they combined these vegetable foods, even though they fermented them and did all sorts of preparations to reduce the anti-nutrients, then they combined it with high lactoferrin, raw dairy foods, in order to even reduce, chelate and remove even more of that sort of deleterious stuff. So I wouldn't say a complete adaptation, but a partial adaptation in that regard would be valid, and proper food preparation of these things and all that. I call it a waste of extra time when I can just have a steak, which takes only a few minutes to prepare, and get the even more nutrition. So that's what I consider it, how I would argue it's a waste of time. Now, in terms of adaptations in general, yep, what's that? We've had tillage since 5,500 years ago. 3,500 years ago. So basically, before we could really ramp up, carb consumption in the world, we really had to go to tillage, which is about 3,500 year BC, which is 5.5, because we're nearly, we're slightly over 2,000 years now. So it's about 5,500 years all up from today. That's a drop in the ocean in time. We've been eating meat and animal foods for millions of years, all different hominins, and we've got the N15 data to prove it. That's all we need. It's a slam dunk, as Bart would say, slam dunk. The N15 data trumps everything. That is the longest adaptation. And I actually did a thing, remember I did an APOE video with Pim. There's actually a video that I did on the APOE gene type, which has to do with basically some of these adaptations. Let me find that video that I did. Go to my playlists. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. Playlists. Go to the right place. And then if you go across in the playlists, and you will find a thing which is my chats with Pim. There are 4 videos there. And the third video in that category is this one, and I will share that. There's the third video, and that's the APOE 2, 3, and 4 diets, why diets matter, and how it came to be. So we're talking about all things about diets and also the genes. And the APOE originally were all 4/4s, and all the apes are 4/4s. And that's basically designed to allow chylomicrons to come in very fast into the system. They're remnant chylomicrons. So when when you're about 200 odd thousand years ago, there was an adaptation where this was an interglacial warm period. I'm trying to remember how long it fucking lasted. I just can't remember. Anyway, and at that time, basically there was an adaptation. We started consuming a bit more carbohydrate because we found it. You know, we're opportunistic. Well, we maybe you know, what I call scavenger obligate carnivores, because traditionally that's what we've been for the most of our existence. We still have our ape adaptation, some adaptation to be able to handle some carbohydrates still. So when we found them, we consumed them. You know, why give up on a calorie? All animals will eat anything. You can throw a piece of meat in front of a cow, it'll eat it. No animal will say no to nutrition. It's, you know, when you don't have a supermarket and you're out in the wild, you maximize anything you can get your hands on, because you don't know whether your next meal is going to come from. So there's a reason for that. But the ApoE3 originated in that period when we had small amounts of carbohydrate access, when it was a warmer period. Didn't last very long. Then about the next one, which is ApoE2, which is also only amongst a very small percentage of the population, that emerged about what was it? It's believed probably about 120 odd thousand years ago or whatever, and that again was another one of those interglacial periods from memory. And again, there was more access to carbohydrates. Again, adaptation, some level of, you know. So why did this happen? Because basically, if you're on a 4-4 for most of your existence, that means we were, for the most of the existence of all the hominin species from Homo erectus onwards, the planet was very cold. All the way down to the tropics, it was basically frost. So you could only eat 4-legged creatures. That's why there was no requirement for an adaptation. That means you could take fat through chylomicrons, take it to the adipose tissue, fill them up as required, so you could actually provide energy from when you didn't have any food in your mouth, and because you didn't know where the next meal was going to come from. And the chylomicron remnants would go to the liver. Well, they would go and interact with HDL, and HDL would basically provide the key, a key on the receptor, which then allows the chylomicron to go into the liver. And basically, when you've got a 4-4 key, it just says, here it is, and go in there immediately. Get in there, get repackaged as a VLDL, and get re-exported out to provide additional circulating energy. That's what it's supposed to be. It's a, you know, energy management system. Now, along comes 200,000 years, interglacial period. Things warm up quite a bit in comparison to the other millions of years of very icy conditions. And all of a sudden, humans have access for the first time in their existence to certain carbohydrates. They try them. They go, oh, this is nice and sweet. And they realize, I've got a sweet tooth. And the body realizes, after they've done this over a couple of generations, we're talking about quite a few thousand generations, they're going, well, this isn't going to stop, is it? We better get a bit of an adaptation for this. So what it does is it slows down chylomicron remnant uptake. So the ApoE3 actually slows things down. So the liver doesn't provide enough, you know, it basically, when it goes, the HDL goes, look, we're going to wait a bit. We'll give you a bit of time, you know. We've got too much sugar in that liver. We don't want to load it up with fat because that's going to cause us a lot of health problems. And so you just stay here for a while, just stay in circulation, and then I will give you the key, and then you can enter once we start packaging and sending out some of this sugar as glycogen to replete other areas. So you're not basically in there with too much sugar and fat in the actual liver and causing too much problems. Insulin resistance, you know, we know the story. Randall cycle, we've talked about it in the past. So it is a method of slowing things down. This is why. And then, you know, the next one, another period, interglacial period, when it got even warmer. And we had to, and some populations, which were primarily, you'll find them in parts of Southeast Asia, China, southern China, parts like that, where some of the prevalence of the 2.2 variant is much higher. And that basically slows things even further, really slows things down. That's why some of these Asian populations have got better adaptation to carbohydrates, because they can really slow down the fats and say, no more fats coming in. And so in terms of liver resistance, insulin resistance is slowed down. But then you come to the modern era and people start getting supermarket food. So for the first time, Asians are not getting small amounts of fat, but they're getting shitloads of fat with the sugar. And they've got no. So one thing, it's staying in the blood for longer. And then they don't have enough storage because they're living in the tropics. They don't have enough fat storage to put it away either. That's why the rates of diabetes are double now. So yes, we do have some level of adaptation to small amounts of carbohydrates and seasonal carbohydrates, but not chronically all year round. We don't have that adaptation. That's just ridiculous, that whole notion. And when we're looking at what our true multiple millions of years of adaptation, the N15 data trumps everything. Slight adaptations through, so we had small adaptations before even the Neolithic period started, or before even agriculture started. So we had small adaptations to small amounts of fruit, berries, and stuff like that. That's what these ApoE variations are, for small adaptations. So just slow down how much fat was going to go in at the same time as sugar was in there. But that's not what we do today. We're not having a couple of berries here and there with people that are adapted, that have got the ApoE33, which is the majority of the population, on the ApoE22, where you can have a low-carb diet and have a couple of berries in summer, seasonal. You've got that slight adaptation for that. That's it. That's what was back then. No, you got a raft of carbohydrates, breadsticks this big and all that sort of stuff. That's not what we've got an adaptation to, that sort of level of sugar. We don't. And we know it, that we don't. And that's why the Egyptians, because we haven't seen a new ApoE emerge, because it usually takes tens and tens of thousands of years. 5,500 years isn't long enough for that adaptation to happen. Now, in another 10,000 years, maybe we do get an adaptation, and there is a new ApoE where it even slows down fat uptake by the liver even more, like for days where you can't get it in, so you can get the fucking sugar out, okay, to protect the liver. But that hasn't happened. We've only got the capacity for small amounts, tiny amounts. That sort of magnification that we've done in modern time has never existed in the past. That's why the body isn't able to adapt. It's just putting up and surrendering and saying, I'm diabetic, I'm this, I'm insulin resistant, I'm fucked. That's what it's doing, and degrading rapidly and chronically, because there is no adaptation to that level of sort of flux, energy flux from carbohydrates. It's just way beyond the adaptive levels of the past. So no, there is no such fucking adaptation. The only reason why they get away with it is because they don't engage the Randall cycle. So when they have a high sugar amount, if you look at the actual other video that I did, which was the dietary guidelines, the first one, in that one there, the first one that I did with Pim, and I discuss Walter Kempner's experiments, and of the time championed, the sort of notion that
this is where new parents will remember life before becoming
God almighty,
new parents.
did not stop there.
This is the
Yeah, I remember this one. It's a really good one.
Poison that he was just ignored.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, politicians, you know, and Pritikin also was a very close friend of Ansel Keys as well, which many people don't realise. And Pritikin was basically a very good mate and friend of McGovern. You know, remember anyway, I won't go to that, but that was the first time. And I do actually talk about Walter Kempler's diet, you know, with the kidney issues and stuff like that, because he wasn't aware of this in the 1930s. He wasn't aware of the ketogenic diet because that was only used for epilepsy and stuff like that by John Hopkins Hospital, University Hospital. But the thing that I'm trying to get across to people is that we don't have adaptation to the levels the only way that they get away with it is basically because they put themselves into a carb mode. They turn off lipolysis completely, because if you know, and they basically engage glycolysis all the way, you know, and that's what they're in, glucose burning mode continuously. So they're also fucking their mitochondria because high deuterium at the same stage. But in the short term, you can, because you disengage the Randall cycle, and you can actually push, even though the level of reactive oxygen species that you generate through complex 1 in the mitochondria because of carbohydrates is much higher. You know, we know that. It's in the physiological textbooks. You know, they can ignore that, but that's the reality, what's happening. They may not be basically blockading the, you know, the receptors because they've downregulated and upregulated 1, so you're not getting a blockading effect. So as a consequence, you're only blockading lipolysis, but not glycolysis in that. It's the absolute opposite when you're doing a low carb diet. So that's why you feel really shitty when you actually have some carbs, you know, or have some fat when you're on a vegan diet. You feel shitty because you're blockading the other mechanism, you know, to basically, you know, utilize the other source of energy. So what happens is when you do these things, you're able to rapidly lose weight, you know, in that regard. You also get an uncoupling effect, both in glycolysis, pure glycolysis or pure lipolysis, either state, non-Randall cycle states, you will also get these changes happening. A number of mechanisms that are very similar to actually get activated. It's really interesting, you know, really interesting how all this works, you know. But 1 will waste away your muscles, 1, unless you're getting enough energy. And this is where Durian Rider's probably right to the veg tart. He goes, you've got to eat shitloads of sugar, because I say that in there to keep basically so that you don't waste your muscles away, because that is true. See, we've got fat storage on board. It's only when we actually get to starvation levels where we've come down to a couple of percentage points of fat that we basically then need an energy source. It doesn't matter what energy source you need, an energy source. Otherwise, at that stage, you will waste away your muscles. For them, it happens much earlier because a lot of them find it very hard to consume. A lot of them basically are eating a lot of complex carbohydrates and stuff like that. They think it's healthier. But the reality is it's got similar deuterium levels, so neither one is healthy. But the raw sugar, actually eating raw sugar, and actually is easy to digest and get the energy in. And it doesn't create any stomach issues. But it creates deficiencies, obviously, nutrient deficiencies. But you can lose rapid weight loss that way. You can use it as a short-term thing, but, you know, it's very unhealthy, especially for long-term mitochondrial health in that way. It's best to go the keto way rather than going this way. But as long as you're getting enough sugar in the system, you'll be, due to deuterium, you'll be aging faster, but you will be losing faster weight, and you will be preserving lean muscle mass as long as you get enough energy in there to preserve it. So these regulatory things actually, engage and protect muscle, even on a high sugar diet. But you've got to keep the energy up. You got to be spoonfuling. That's why durian rider sits there eating continuously, because to get enough to maintain. And even then he struggles. That's why he has to basically do anabolic steroids, because, it's just the way it works. It works differently. We are designed to store energy as fat and utilize it efficiently and create metabolic water, for that. What they do is they dehydrate themselves. And on top of that, they basically have difficulty getting enough energy in. And they waste away eventually even some of their muscle mass, lean muscle mass. So they really struggle on those fronts. Can you imagine? This is why most vegans that don't do the durian rider type, mass sugar levels usually can't last for, they usually, them 6 months are off the vegan diet, or 12 months are off the vegan diet, or whatever, because they can't get enough energy in. That's the problem. Remember, there's a difference in terms of energy production between eating species appropriate foods and generating more energy, and less energy through sugar production. So there is that level. So you've got to consume, you've got to be literally spooning down the sugar like there's no tomorrow. Actually, Walter Kemp used to actually beat, I'm not kidding you, he had a stick, because he was an old German Jew that had the old, discipline attitude, and he used to beat his clients with a stick back in the 1930s. I'm not kidding you. He used to beat them. He'd be in jail nowadays, but he used to beat them back then to comply to eat more sugar, because they said, so fruit juices and all sorts of other things to keep up the energy levels so they wouldn't waste away muscle. Crazy things. That's what you have to do to basically even sustain a vegan diet for a short period. And he knew it's not sustainable. The only thing that he supplemented because of the high insulin was because you can't supplement the other minerals. You've got too much mineral retention, high blood pressure and all that sort of stuff. To avoid that, he basically only had them supplementing iron supplements, because the diet's completely deficient in iron. And as he said, you can only do it for about a year, and then you have to bring animal foods and other foods back in order to basically, so it was a therapeutic method. Now these fucktards are basically doing it on a regular basis and think it's a lifestyle thing. How fucking crazy is that? Walter knew it. Even Durian knows it to some extent. He won't admit it, but he knows it. But he criticizes the others. Oh, you fuckers should be eating more sugar. Why don't you eat more sugar? One, it'll age you faster, durian, right? That's why you're wearing a toupee and you're falling apart, and you need steroids to maintain all that. But on the other side, people just can't eat that amount of shit. And eventually they're going to do far more mitochondrial damage in the long run. So even if they go back to a species appropriate diet, they will. So I prefer not telling vegans about this, because then they'll probably go out and buy themselves raw sugar and eat raw sugar all day I'm not kidding you, to basically maintain their energy so they don't waste away, so they can stay on the vegan diet for far longer and eventually have more mitochondrial damage in the long run by doing that, from the high deuterium. So, yeah, what can you say? Probably Freely gets away with it a bit more because she's in the tropics. And in the tropics, basically, you've got deuterium depletion. So that helps. It basically is it's not perfect, but she can sustain it a bit longer with a whole lot of other supplements and other shit that she does. So, yeah.
Yeah, everybody. Now that you mention it.
And you know what? And probably cheats and hates herself for that, because they all do.
Yes.
They all do. They all admit it after they leave veganism, but they all do. And they feel guilty and they chastise themselves for doing that, And I suspect she does it as well, because people that are guilty usually are so hard on others. Have you noticed?
Indeed.
And she is so hard on other people. I'm going, you're on a guilt trip and you're guilting other people because you're guilty yourself. you know, and you don't want to admit it, but you have to attack, you know, these other people for making you weak as well. It's a really strange psychological state she's in. That doesn't surprise me. Anyway, that's a nice one. Very nice, Lukey. Let me put it up. Sugar is a superfood. Yes, yes. I definitely feel like that when I'm looking at Ray Pete. He actually gets even worse than that now. He actually doesn't even make any public appearances. That's how bad he's become. People are saying
it's like,
you know, he can't make sense anymore.
No, yes, and I've seen the strong sisters are making like more videos on Ray Pete principles and things like that. So they have other people that follow his teachings come on the videos and not Ray Pete himself. And it's like,
yeah, Salad Boy, the strong, all these people are basically either what I call Ray Pete lights or Ray Pete full bloods. But yeah, one of the two, you know, they've lost the plot in that regard.
Harry, I think I need to get going. I need my beauty sleep.
Yes. We can't neglect the beauty sleep. That's right. You go away, you get it. And if Richard turns back up, that's fine. If he doesn't, he's probably got a mate of his. There's always the afternoon shift, the night shift for me, the morning shift for you if you turn up.
Yes.
Anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And thanks for some of the local insights of the Brazilian way of life and things that you've mentioned. That look, all this sort of stuff helps us because it actually gives us a richer tapestry of information of, you know, these sort of things that we don't know about. You've picked up wisdom from, you know, people around you, myself from others, you know, and it all helps in the long run because it enriches all of us. So I do appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Glad to offer something.
Yeah, and thanks for all the other stuff. I go through it sometimes in the evening to get a laugh out of some of that. So yeah, if I need to laugh or, you know, you know, just get, tickle my funny bone, so to speak, I do go through them and check them out. So thank you. They're very much appreciated.
I'm glad it serves that purpose. That is the idea.
It definitely does.
Anyhow, I'll be leaving, and everyone enjoy the show and stay well. Bye-bye.
See you, mate. Anyway, I better save that off before I forget. I've done that before. Anyway, we're nearly there. And I've probably fallen behind a bit, so eventually I will try and catch up at some stage. Yeah, exactly. Precisely 350,000 years. And it's actually tillage is only 3,500 BC is when really it ramped up. Before that, it was just basically some wild plants that were, you know, occasionally consumed by tribal people. They were still hunting and gathering, and they were just using. And then eventually, even when they settled down, it was basically for thousands of years, they still hunted and fished because there was very little that they could get from it. And eventually somebody came up with tillage, and the rest is history. And that's when civilization started after tillage, and it went to shit after that. In some ways we did get to this sort of where we've got computers and we can communicate from different parts of the world. So, you know, there were upsides, but there were also a lot of downsides in terms of health. That was before. Yep, that's how far behind I am. Fuck. Yes, quite behind. Harry, quite behind. Okay, and saved. Yeah, and back into it. Oh, hold on. In one video, you mentioned choline can convert to folate. Yep, in most people. Interesting as followed how low on carnivore diet on paper. Basically, what it actually happens, I have two issues. I can't, because also methionine can convert to choline, and choline then can convert to folate in the majority of people. And the Chinese also, 76% of the Chinese, Han Chinese in particular, they have an endogenous capacity to generate choline. So they have another advantage. So in that regard, so they don't even have to eat it. They can produce it even from plant proteins. So that's quite an exception to the rule. And that's because for a long period of time, they were deprived of a lot of animal foods due to some of their emperors, and this adaptation would have emerged under those pressures because choline is so essential for the body to function properly. You know, we're not talking about only the brain, we're talking about liver function, all sorts of organ functions. It's so critical. So yes, where even from small amounts of methionine, vegans can convert some of it, but it's still they're getting suboptimal, which isn't good for them. Choline is very important for exporting fat out of the liver. So if you have a choline deficient diet, you're likely to have also higher fatty liver. We tend to, as carnivores, because first of all, you're not consuming refined crap and anything like that. And on the other hand, you're actually consuming a lot of methionine. But if you're one of those rare people like myself who don't have that capacity, then you may need to supplement. And so I tend to eat foods that have animal foods like liver and eggs that have got more folate, because I can't do the conversion. And I also can't do the conversion for choline. So I have to, and eggs and liver are both high in choline as well. So in a sense, by having those foods, I don't have a problem. I get enough choline in. It's only when I get sick and tired of those foods, I use occasionally a supplement of choline. But that's very rare now because I usually get it primarily from the diet. But yeah, but that's me. And that's why most carnivores don't have a problem. They can do a steak-only diet. They'll convert the high levels of methionine they're getting in to choline, and then the body will convert part of that to basically folate. And then they're getting the B vitamins, which are supporting the methylation side, the enzyme. And then they're getting enough B12 and B6 from the meats. So pretty much they're done. They're complete. So, you know, they just have to do some of those extra enzymatic, conversions. But generally speaking, if you're eating plenty of meat, it all sort of works out in the end, in a sense, which is the way it's supposed to work. Body's like a Swiss Army knife, unless you've got some specific genetics like myself, or some people that can't convert certain carotenoids. So, animal muscle meat tends to have also carotenoids, and those carotenoids, it's not like plants, it's small amounts, but if you have that genetic thing, you can forget about converting those, and you may need a bit more things like liver, cod liver, or whatever, if you come from the British Isles in particular. Why? Because basically you don't have good conversion rates of carotenoids, so you need to get it in the animal form in that regard. So those are slight differences between populations for adaptations and a whole lot of different reasons. So exposure levels, so you don't get into toxic levels, so you basically manage that sort of things. But it means that if you're eating less of the animal foods, then you will have a deficiency if you come from those regions of the world, particularly the British Isles, or Iceland as well, and a few other, and a number of people in the Nordic areas as well. The reason why in the Nordic areas that it's not as prevalent is because they did move to central. A lot of these populations used to sort of raid down into central, intermix, rape and pillage as they, take some of their women from those areas or into the sort of the sort of the Ukrainian area and stuff like that. So bringing people back. I mean, let's not forget that the Russians, or the name Russians, Rus, was basically a Viking group that were called Rus, and they basically became the kings of those Slavs in that region. Anyway, it's for another day, that sort of story. But yeah, so they're not as bad as the British Isles or the Icelandic people, who tended to stay in that area far more concentrated and have these adaptations in particular, especially the Scots, Welsh, and the Irish in higher amounts, where the Anglo-Saxons, it's a sort of a mixed bag depending on the Britons that they intermixed with. So it's sort of all over the place between regions. Anyway, g'day Skunk Master, good to see you here, mate. You've probably been here for a while, and yes, but I'm so behind. Anyway, Tinks, I just started taurine. Well, of 100% taurine powder, you recommend? Yes, pure stuff. The pure stuff. Please don't snort it. Yes, good. No meds at all. Fantastic. Me neither. What's the malic acid dose to take with or without food? I have 800 milligrams. Yeah, I think I was taking about 800 milligrams at the time. I think that's what from memory, it's a while ago. So I think it was about around about those levels, in a sense. Got to go back and find the actual material that I used, and at some stage do a video on it, and actually show the brand that I used. It was what was it, Piper River, or it's got one of those funny names. The brand, Australian brand, and so it's what I used as my malic acid. G'day Sonia, good to see you here. And Zombie, always a pleasure. Yes, Richard's beard. Winter beard, showing my age. The noise. Yes, yes. Bit of a problem. Since you're having a colourful conversation, I can sort of go a bit faster. Seasoned with garlic and onions. G'day, John. Good to see you, mate. How do you know for sure the source of your heart condition is nothing else showing up on the scans as a cause hypothesis? They actually did a thorough test to find out that I did have a blockage about 10 years ago. So yes, it was well assessed that it was about 90% blocked. So, and I had some fibrotic tissue as well. It was properly scanned. So yes, they actually went down there and actually investigated it properly to see exactly, well, up through my penis anyway, but the catheter was put, and they definitely checked it thoroughly. So yeah, the blockage was there, and I was having shortness of breath and struggling. So yes, it was definitely quite a bit of blockage there at the time. So yep, not hypothetical with these sort of things. They definitely saw it. Yes, it was what is it, getting by this coming Christmas, because it just happened after Christmas, or actually after the new year it happened. It will basically be 11 years. So it's been a while. Let's put it that way. The nice thing is I've got no more fibrotic tissue. I do believe that taurine played a big role. High doses of taurine cleared out my fibrotic tissue in my heart. So that I'm confident with. I've looked at the research, and that's why I used it, and I've confirmed it. I think that obviously doing low carb, keto, paleo, doing all these sort of things, they would have also been very helpful in improving. But I think also the importance of, I had like glassing in one of my lungs, my left lung, and it was quite severe. The last scan that I did in 2018, there was very little left. So, that doesn't go away even with a diet. I know that because many other people, they usually say it's permanent. The only thing that cleared it out was high doses of taurine. So I think, some of this sort of stuff has been sorting out a lot of things. Carnivore diet, yes, helps. But I would say taurine plays a big role. Yeah, look, B vitamins, I would say, yep, you can take them with a strict carnivore diet. It's probably even better. You'll get better results in that regard. Yes, just make sure you've got enough, vitamin D in your system. Now that it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere, you should be fine. You don't need any supplementation. Just get out in the sun. It's probably better for you. It's probably better for your blood pressure because you'll basically get better nitric oxide synthesis, and you'll get cholesterol sulfate, which is really important. It improves the endothelial function. So get out there and enjoy the sun is what I say. And in winter, try and I usually didn't supplement in the past. I used to go to the tropics for about a month in the middle of winter, and I used to eat, foods that are high in, especially pig's fat, which is very high, free, the type of that go forage, so that are free range foraging animals. And pig fat has, and I actually tend to cook with lard and butter, and they tend to have higher levels of vitamin D as well. Eggs also have some vitamin D, and I do a bit of cod liver oil as well. So, and I used to go and increase my, replete my stored 25 OHD levels for 1 month in the tropics, and really enjoyed sitting out there and sunbaking and getting as much sun as possible throughout the day by walking around. So, my vitamin D levels were always pretty good in that regard. But because of COVID and restrictions on overseas travel, unfortunately, I've had to go back to supplements. Not that I wanted to, but I had to, so to maintain, especially in this COVID environment, you got to have the supplements to make sure you can keep those respiratory infections at bay and away. So, yes, very, very important. Oops. Yep. Remicla disappeared. Good to see you here, mate. And yeah, so it's good that he's. I've said to him, look, I don't want you staying too long. Sleep's important. Oh, maybe he is. Maybe he is. Well, John may be talking about a CAC scan. No, I didn't do. I'm talking about invasive scans where they put a catheter right through the heart and actually can see the actual blockage. So I'm talking about that sort of stuff. CAC scores, all that it shows is that there is no calcium there. And so if there is, let's say, like there is like a recent plaque which hasn't hardened with calcium, and it's not, and a lot of fibrotic tissue, then it won't show up very well. If it's early plaquing. If it's later plaquing, then it will show up much better. So a 0 score doesn't mean you don't have any. It just means that you may have very new stuff. Obviously, if you're eating a species appropriate diet, it's not gonna be an issue. It's really basically if you're not eating a species appropriate diet that you may. But usually, people that haven't been eating a species appropriate diet for some time tend to have quite higher numbers. So if you've got a 0, you've been probably doing the right thing for a very long time in that regard for those sort of scans. I know they're not perfect, some of that sort of stuff. Some of the older technology which were used in older studies and all that were problematic because it depended on the angle you took the image and stuff like that. So it was problematic. But more of the new technology now is much better. So it was more of a problem in the past rather than nowadays. But when sort of there are different techniques. Anyway. Okay, I'll just put that up on the screen now. So this is the sort of stuff I'm talking about, an angiogram type thing. Okay. That's what we're talking about. Going to the source. So they can look at the arteries in the brain, heart, kidneys. They can actually see with a catheter that they've, they can actually see exactly what's going on in there. This is invasive procedures done under anesthetic, and I was put under when they did this. So this is not the general scans that people do, which are non-invasive. This is highly invasive, and it's also dangerous. You can actually have an injury, a heart injury from this, and potentially if the person doesn't know what they're doing properly, and also end up with a heart attack at that moment. So this is a very invasive procedure, and so it could only be done in the hospital with medical staff ready to go if you have a heart attack at that moment. So it's a risky procedure. It's not to be done lightly. This is not something you do. This is the doctor will only do this if they've actually done an initial scan. They've seen quite a bit of potential blockage, and they go, okay, we need to do something like this to really find out exactly what's happening. And they only do that specific cases. They don't do it on a willy-nilly basis. This is not an outpatient's procedure. This, you can't go in and just pay for it and do this. No. This is a very invasive procedure, but very accurate. So where the others are basically not as invasive, but have the potential risk of some level of inaccuracy potentially. No, that's okay, mate. Don't worry. If you want to come in later or you want to come in the evening show, just send me an email and I'll send you a link. That's fine. Don't worry, Richard. I'm fine. Yep. Riboflavin plays a big role with methylation. It actually has tongue twister, a regulatory effect on, the enzyme that is important in the pathway, which is the B12, folate, B6 pathway. Riboflavin has an important role, especially if you've got an MTHFR gene like myself, yours truly. How many problems do I have? And basically then probably explains why I had cardiovascular issues, because I wasn't on a species appropriate diet, and I'm far more required to be because of all these genetic reasons. So yes, exactly. So exactly. And yes, it's exactly why I said to you, my Lukey, he's not here, he's asleep now, but yes, repeat crackpots can go cry. Exactly. You definitely need riboflavin to support the thyroid system. Yes, but getting back to what I was saying earlier, yes, riboflavin plays a very important role in terms of the functioning of that pathway. So you've got two methylation key pathways in that regard. So yes, very, very important. And anybody that's seen my recent video that I did on homocysteine, they can go and check that out and see how methionine plays a big role there as well. The more methionine, the more animal foods you eat, the more your body can deal with homocysteine. So that as well. So go and check it out. I'm not going to discuss that now because that would be a long conversation, and it's already been covered in that video. So you know the one that I'm talking about. Which is... Oh, come on. Just clicking up was... Oh, God almighty. It was taking me to the studio. YouTube's so great sometimes. It works so effortlessly and perfect. And let's put it on the screen. So the where is it? Here it is. That one there. Are vegans right that meat increases homocysteine? So that one there, which is about a month ago, with Gregor. In his more youthful days. I'll drop that in there as well. That's the one there. So go wait and see that. And that's right, I need to get back to Sky. I forgot about that. Okay, so where's the... It's way back. Yeah. Here's that methylation one. That was about a year ago, where I discuss exactly that point, which is very important for riboflavin. I tend to do things just once, so you can actually just Google Harry Serpanos and, methylation or stuff like that. You won't get a lot. G'day, guys. This is part 1 on methylation. So this will just be looking at the key SNPs and some sort of mitigation approaches. The second part will be looking at some other underlying issues. And the third part will sort of try to tie it all together. So I think this one, there it is. So basically, as you can see, the people that basically had the MTHFR issue, when they took basically riboflavin supplementation, look at that drop in homocysteine. Just dropped off the show. That's all you need. So if you've got that SNP, you don't take folate because that can burn through your B12 and you'll end up demented and stupid. You don't take basically B12 as an example because you will basically overtax your folate. You get it from the diet and the body then will adjust, folate, methionine to choline to folate. You'll get the other stuff from the diet. You'll be fine, in that regard. And you get the riboflavin because animal foods are very high in riboflavin, both meat and dairy. And if you've got that SNP, you don't need to take any other supplement. Naturopaths will put you on folate and they'll deplete your B12 and they'll basically make you dumb and demented like most vegetables are. But what you do need is riboflavin to correct the enzyme, to actually upregulate the enzyme so it actually functions better. So you don't need any supplements. And it's in the literature. And most people are either ignorant of it or don't understand it. I don't know. Either way, it makes no difference. Yes, and riboflavin does help with T3. Anyway, oops, lost my spot. I don't drink a lot of water, I can tell you. I get a bit from the milk. I get a bit but I don't have a really high thirst because I do tend to consume a bit more fat. And so I get hydration from fat primarily. So I don't have that sort of urge continuously to get the water in. When I was on a carbohydrate diet, I was constantly thirsty, constantly pissing and constantly, now I'd probably go for a piss 3 times a day, where then I was going 6-7 times a day pissing, And the only reason I go 3 times a day is when I drink coffee. When I don't drink coffee at all, I only go 2 times a day, early in the morning and then later in the evening. So, yeah, it's, because you upregulate your antidiuretic hormones and the body then adjusts appropriately. And my urine is not dark. It's not very light, but it's basically somewhere in between. Sometimes I'm concerned that I'm actually getting too much hydration because it can go a bit lighter. I don't consume shitloads of water and my urine is on the lighter side, which is, it's probably because I'm, getting some water from the fat and stuff like that, and some of the foods, because I don't overcook them. And that's where it's coming from. But usually if you look at an animal, when it pisses, it's quite yellowy. It's not as diluted. That's how piss is supposed to be. This highly diluted thing isn't a good thing. It's a very unhealthy thing. It's what most people do nowadays. Everybody thinks that they have to consume 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 glasses of water. This, I've only had that amount, and I'll probably have all this for the whole day and probably a coffee. That's it. The rest of it comes from hydration from food, which is also low deuterium. When you don't overcook the food, obviously, you'll get that. The best sources for low deuterium water are basically animal foods or green leafy vegetables, but they are not good for your gut. So I wouldn't recommend a lot of those. But yes, they also, because of photosynthesis, they have lower deuterium levels as well. But they've got shit nutrition, fibrous shit that tears your gut apart. So give those a miss. I mean, I know some tribal people, as even Mary saw them when she went out with the Hunza, and they actually just found these low deuterium plants that basically they just, squeezed all the water content of those plants out. And that's what tribal people do. Camels eat cactus, which is also low deuterium. Actually, cactus is one of the lowest deuterium plants in the world. As I said, camels are deuterium depleting super machines. That's why they don't show their age. Low deuterium, very low age. Remember, water, this has 150 parts per million at sea level, the same amount that raw sugar has. So when you're actually consuming this sort of water, it's like consuming, liquid sugar. It just doesn't taste like sugar. But in terms of deuterium, it has the same effect. You can do it in the tropics, fine, because you're depleting much, 90 parts per million every hour. But you're not doing it in a cold climate like Tasmania. Fuck no, that's not happening. You've probably converting more of that into sugar. That's why. Tero, that's exactly why. I don't have that problem. You may still have some issues or a mitochondrial issue. I don't know. It could be a number of things. I know some people haven't got good fat adaptation, and I always recommend is cut back on the proteins. Go down to 20% protein, 80% fat for a certain period of time. Get your mitochondrial efficiency up. Get some more of those, long chain saturated fats. What they do is they induce through reverse electron transport through complex 1, they induce new biosynthesis of mitochondria. So over time, what happens is your mitochondrial efficiency goes up, and when it does that, then you can cut back on the fat, increase the actual protein amount, and you're good to go in that regard. I noticed something similar, but I don't have that problem anymore. And it was due again because of the diets we came off before. And you end up in eating a lot of protein and not fat, and not adapting. You end up in a sort of like a glycolytic state. It's like and it's not a good state you want to be in. You want to basically become fat adapted, and that takes time because we haven't grown ancestrally. We haven't adapted. So you've got to go. I think the best thing that the keto diet did for me was it, like even the therapeutic keto, what it did was it made me fully fat adapted. I can have some carbs and then switch back, and I don't even notice. I don't have any hungers. I don't have any, cravings for sugar. I don't get any sort of severe peeing episodes or whatever, because I'm really fat adapted. My body can go, yeah, I know how to do it. I've got all the enzymes transcripted. Yep, we'll switch back to that. That's what you're on now. Yep, fine. And that's, I think the difference is the adaptation, which is the critical component, Tero. What if you did a carnivore diet with no ruminants? Yeah, you can do that. Monogastrics like pigs, yep, you can do that. Many populations have for a very long time. So there are different options that you can do. You're welcome, Tero. So as I said, it's not a race, Tero, for us to all become identical in the way we eat. At the end of the day, we're all starting from a different base. I mean, I started from cardiovascular disease issues a decade ago. We all start from a different base with different things and all that, and we need to make a certain types of adjustments. So I think something similar was happening to Sarah, carnivore yogi. She was having similar things. and she's switched to a more high fat type, and she's starting to get more fat adapted. I think it's critical to be fat adapted. Tribal populations would have been fat adapted from a young age. And so having extra protein doesn't affect them. The fat adapted, they can maintain a low insulin to glucagon ratio of 1.3. But if you're not fat adapted, you'll be running a higher insulin, and you'll be basically blocking, immediately you block, lipolysis by doing that. And when you block lipolysis, because you still have an underlying insulin resistant, you haven't become insulin sensitive and fat adapted, you can't switch to the other fuel because you can't access it. The other thing, you're not adapted. And so you're in a glycolytic sort of state where you're burning sugar still, and you're turning in an inefficient way a lot of that, and you end up basically peeing more, feeling less energized to some extent as well. So all that sort of stuff. It varies between people, but symptoms are very similar. Look, yeah, I've actually said to people, you possibly, let's say somebody was a vegetarian for ridiculous reasons, but I will respect other people's sort of maybe religious reasons. That may be another case. Yeah, sorry if you have those sort of religious reasons for it. I don't think it's optimal, but I think it's doable. And the way you would do it is you would focus on eggs, dairy, and crustaceans. Crustaceans are very, very important in that regard. So that is something that I would do. Am I at the bottom? Fuck, that was fast. Or did I skip deliberately? I'm not even sure. Yes, taking now Pfizer and eating more fat. I don't have to pee so often. You're right. Yep. Good. So yeah, you will eventually adapt and you will be able to go higher protein. So be patient, as I say. I basically had the same problem. Now I can eat shitloads of meat and I don't have that problem at all. I eat shitloads of meat. And because I'm adapted, it's not an issue in that regard. Yeah, Pfizer, exactly. Next month is when I will, how many days have I got? I have about 11 days to go before I start Pfizer again. So July, August, September is my period. And then after that, none for the other 3 months. And then in January, not on the 1st, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, you don't do these sort of things. So on the 2nd, and only January, I'll do for 5 days, and then February and March. And then after that, because you usually get Easter and things like that, you don't want to be doing that sort of stuff. So pretty much that is my routine now. I did the early part of the year. I'm going to do this part of the year, the middle part of the year. And then, and then basically I'll be back into it, again in the new year as it goes. So 3 months on, 3 months off. I'm still looking into it. I'm still looking into it and whether to do it every month at the beginning of the month. I'm still I'm happy with the research I've done and the relationships and all that. What I'm doing currently, some research, is to see whether is it really a problem with muscle protein synthesis. That's where my concern is. As you get older, I tend to basically put a lot of importance to muscle protein synthesis to maintaining good bones and muscles into old age. That will guarantee you a more longevity than anything else, and a better health span. So it's a sort of a trade-off. It's a sort of a halfway house. And so, maybe we can do it every month without any really deleterious ramifications, but I'm still investigating. And if basically, I either find enough evidence to basically, yep, or I'm actually looking at a couple of compounds and a couple of other things potentially could allow us to do it every month on the beginning of the month. But I want to be certain before I make any recommendations at this stage. So always play it safe. Be certain that we do things without putting ourselves or others at risk, these are the key things, very important, that we don't actually put others at risk, and ourselves as well, very important. Yes, we are important. But yes, pretty much that. What's happened? Everybody's gone quiet. The stream's dropped a bit. We've got less people here. So all I can say is please like this video. Please share it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe as well. So it all helps with the algorithms, as they say. And it also helps with all the other sort of stuff. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm here. Phoenix is here. Good on you, mate. Ask me a question, Phoenix. Get me going again. You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. Because we're nearly up to 3 hours. We're about 4 minutes away. So if anybody wants to get a quick question in, now's the time, because I have to prepare, and probably around just before 2 o'clock, in about less than half an hour, I'll be walking somewhere else with going shopping, me and Ling. So she's probably on this, probably popped in or not on the stream. Yes, I'm not too far away from finishing Ling, so we can go for our walk, going shopping out to the supermarkets. Anyway, I've been here all stream, just listening while I work. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing. Thoughts on B vitamin availability in whole bread? Not much, unless it's fortified. The processing of, it's not like the old grains where they fermented it for about 3 days, and they also were low in sort of like gluten, like the Zea bread and stuff like that. And so as a consequence, it wasn't as much of an issue. Some of the B vitamins were more available in those sort of, now they're so refined and so powdered, most of the nutrition, they literally have to fortify bread nowadays to put stuff in. And even the so-called whole bread, it's just crap. It's just sugar. That's all it is. And what they do is they remove the husk, they powder it, and they throw in some of the husk. They grind up the husk and throw it in, and it's sold as whole bread. It's a con, It's really a con. The whole industry is a con with these sort of things. The processed food industry, you can't trust anything out there, the way they operate. So yeah, let alone you don't need this sort of stuff. But if you were to combine it with raw milk, which is full of lactoferrin, you could probably minimize this inappropriate foods anti-nutrient behaviors. But beyond that, you probably don't need it. If you think about your kids and stuff like that, there are also meals that provide, for instance, Yeah, well, they say a lot of they say a lot about that. There are a lot in the brand, but I mean, you will get things like thiamine and a few others that are pretty good in there. But at the same time, the bioavailability compared to in a grain compared to some other plants is much lower. So that's another problem with it in that regard. So, and the problem is, what about all the anti-nutrients? They're all in the brain as well. That's the problem. There's too many anti-nutrients as well. So and unless you ferment it for a couple of days, unless you actually use traditional methods to break down some of these anti-nutrients, then you're still, it's not good for you in that regard. Now, as I said earlier, you could buy Zea bread, which has double from normal, from what we call traditional bread. Zea bread is an older ancient bread, which was very popular in ancient Greece. You can still buy it, but you can actually buy the flour of Zea bread. And if you buy the flour of Zea bread, you can sort of do the fermentation, break it down and all that. It's got about 1/10 of the gluten, and it's got less anti-nutrients. It's got double the minerals and double the vitamins. So it's very much nutrient dense compared to other breads. It's called Zea, and let's see if I can find. Where are you located, Phoenix Compilation? Which part of the world are you located in? That would help as well. Yeah, exactly. This is the ancient grain Zea bread. It's a recipe here on this page here. It's sort of a mixture. These people use regular. They're not using, because Zea bread is very hard. What it does is the next day after you've cooked it, the next day is basically like a rock. Oops, get rid of that. So as you can see here, easy bread recipe, blah, blah, blah. Oldest cereal in the world, made from the home of the oldest. That is Zea in Greek. Zea, flour from Zea doesn't contain gluten. It does, but so little. So it's friendly alternative for people with gluten intolerance. Basically, if you ferment it, they're practically nearly zero, but there is, anyway, I'm not going to argue with the site. It is also rich in fiber, which is completely irrelevant. It is very rich in protein. It has double the protein count of other breads. And the amino acid lysine. Vitamins like A, E, and B, and minerals such as magnesium is easily digestible. So that's what it looks like. So if you if you tend to want to make some bread for your children that basically want that sort of stuff, that's probably a better option in that regard. Obviously, it's not species appropriate food, but it's, you know. So Zea flour can be sold. This is in Greece, where this person lives. Zea flour can be sold from 3.8 euros per kilo, from €5 kilos, depending on the shop, package, and the organic or non-organic label. So I don't know whether these people have any links to basically how to get it, but this is obviously probably easier for somebody in Europe to be able to access from Greece, probably much harder from somebody from North America to access in that regard. So, yeah. Is it gauze? What did I miss? You said you've got a lot of questions. You came in very late. There we go. Does kefir have deuterium? Also, goat milk, more tolerable for somebody lactose intolerant. Probably, if it's raw, if it's raw, you're going to have the lactase, and you probably, because it's closer to human milk, you'll probably be able to. Some people have told me they can. When it comes to deuterium, most animal foods, even the ones which are animal-based sugars, tend to have lower deuterium. So they tend to have very similar levels as the protein of animal flesh. So it's less problematic because animals deplete deuterium. That's why plants can't, unless they photosynthesize. So the green parts do because they can photosynthesize. But the way they do it is the photosynthetic effect changes the actual hydrogen bonds in the water in the green part of the plant. And what it does is it translocates those hydrogen proton, the hydrogen ions from that are deuterium, that it translocates them to the actual plant fruit. And that's why the fruit of a plant or the sugar part of the plant has more deuterium. So where in animal foods, you're actually deriving from, you're creating, endogenously, and it's different. It's not the same, So the sugar, even on triglycerides, that again, which is endogenously produced through gluconeogenesis, again is deuterium depleted sugar. Not all sugars are the same. Some sugars are lower and some sugars are higher. So sugars from nature can be anywhere between 145 parts per million to 160 odd parts per million. So they can vary quite a bit depending on the plant they come from, the concentration that plant's actually induced. So that's why different carbohydrates can have different levels of deuterium. So it's not uniform like one thing, Water can have different levels. So the higher the elevation, the more UV radiation, the lower the fractionation of the deuterionated, as it's called, water can change. So it can alter those molecular or the hydrogen bonds and reduce the deuterium level in that water. So mountain water is healthier than sea level water. This is the reason why I've got a hypothesis about the Inuit and their sort of SNPs, why they need long chain fats and all that, and their adaptation. Mine is a deuterium depletion thing to dilute the high deuterium stuff that they get in their environment at sea level, and they can't deplete because of the lack of sun. That's my hypothesis. I know Bart has done a video explaining the actual genetics, how they work, which is fine. But the reason why this genetic change happened is one, is my hypothesis. You won't hear it anywhere else, and it is a deuterium depletion thing. You need more long chain fats in order to create more metabolic water and dilute the stuff coming in from the environment, okay, from the snow and stuff like that, which is high in deuterium that is used in cooking and stuff like that. So I think I believe it's an adaptation of this, a deuterium depletion adaptation. That's my theory anyway. And you don't see it, you see it in the Inuit that are closer to the Arctic rather than the ones further away from the Arctic. And they're eating the same foods. The difference is the environment is providing different deuterium, effects in that regard. And so I believe that's the driver there. That's my hypothesis. I don't know whether it'll ever be researched. If you're an academic, please research it for me. And you did nail the pronunciation of my nickname. Okay. Okay. Good. The helmet is a 16th century Burgonet. Okay. Oh, nice. There you go. You learn something every day. Now, that was that part. California. Can't help you there. I don't know where you'd be able to find that. Appreciate your content. Thanks, mate. Yep. Appreciate it. That was the zebra bread, which is species inappropriate, Phoenix. I hope that's for your little kiddies that still want some of that sort of stuff. Haven't activated it yet. Yes. So yeah, I don't know. Look, there are Greek specialty shops around the world that do actually get different food items from Greece. So you will find, but you have to go into the Greek communities. So if you've got a local Greek community in your neighborhood or close by or whatever, go and ask them where the local Greek shops that sell local Greek foods and stuff from Greece. And they'll tell you, and then you can go to one of those and actually look and ask them whether they've got Zea flour. And if they've got Zea flour, if they don't have it, can they get it? So there's always those options. I mean, there's a wholesaler down here, and Dad's, because he had a small business, he's got a sort of a wholesale accounts with both the Greek businesses, the wholesalers down here. And so he can just walk in and purchase, stuff in that regard. So anybody that knows in Hobart, Stokes and Hammond, which is basically a big wholesaler thing, Dad's still got an account with them. He goes in there and gets stuff, which is good. Saves me a bit of money when he gets stuff from me as well. So, yes, shouldn't say that too loud. But, yeah, in that regard, you're a young whippersnapper that basically still wants a bit of carbs. Is that it? Remember, they do damage your mitochondria in the long run, and when you turn into an old fart like me, you'll be let's say you'll be disappointed in yourself that you basically did so much mitochondrial damage, and now you're struggling to try and fix everything in your mid-50s like I'm doing. So let me put it this way. When you've got it, don't give it away for nothing. So in that regard. But look, the occasional stuff we all do. I mean, I have my Saturday cheat day, which was yesterday, which, ice cream and all that. I just haven't done it I've sort of cut back on these indiscretions recently. I did have a momentary lapse where my mind went and I realized there's nothing in the fridge, and I go, no, I'm not going to walk up the road. So, and I looked at the time and it was late, and I go, oh, great, it's late. So even if I walked up the road, they're closed. So, yes, we all have those momentary lapses. Believe me, even I do. Fair enough. So you have a few indiscretions. Okay, so you work out a lot. So you probably deplete a lot of that stuff anyway. You you turn into glycogen. Basically, you replete glycogen. So yes, but you don't need it. You know, if you're thinking about that, it helps with muscles. No, there's nothing. Insulin has nothing to do with it. It's all down to leucine. The research is quite clear. It's all down to leucine. That's why, remember those rats, when they ate more and more and more protein, they became bigger and bigger fucking rats. No insulin required there, all leucine. So it's always has been. That's why most bodybuilders nowadays basically tend to be muscular fat, not lean, and then they have to do all these crazy low carb cuts, you know, before competition, and then they bloat out again right after competition. It's crazy what they do, what they put their bodies through. Very unhealthy, very unnatural. Yes, there are consequences, believe me, young man. There are consequences. Yes, I know, I love ice cream as well. Had to give it a bit of a miss this week, and my recipe making sort of skills are shit. So I'm trying to convince Ling to make me some more. Did you hear that, Ling? Anyway, 12 minutes away. She's probably getting ready, and she'll be basically saying, "Where the fuck are you?" Sending me a message. Yes, the Uberrats. That's the Uberrats, the supreme Uberrats, the top end rat in the business. Yes. So they were doing 70% protein, you know, shitloads, absolute shitloads, you know. So those rats were fucking, you know, ginormous and lean as. Absolutely lean as, because I was just feeding them protein. But, you know, it proved a point, you know, bigger kidneys, more muscular, bigger bones, bigger everything. They were just fucking ginormous. They were brick shithouses. So they were impressive. G'day, M. Jordan. How are you? You're late. Reach out to Vegan Gains again. I really want to see the debate. Oh, well, who cares? If he accepts, I'll do it. If he doesn't, I suspect he won't after he checks me out. So, but yes, I would be more than willing to, you know, kick his ass. Definitely. He's actually, you know, in one regard, I feel sorry for him because he's actually less capable now compared to when he was younger and he was more fitter and he hadn't deteriorated to the level he has. So it's like taking candy from a baby nearly. So, yes. But then again, I'll let him keep his candy. If you still have time, I was wondering, no, I don't. What you have found to work best from a personal mechanistic perspective in regards to hygiene products, shampoo. I usually get animal-based stuff. We do have a company down here in Tasmania that produces animal-based stuff, toothbrushes and stuff like that, and gels and stuff, all that. I get stuff without any crap. It's basically, there's a place down here in Tasmania, it's called City Organic. I've shown last time and all that. I am going to do something like that to show what I use, you know, like the different stuff that basically doesn't have any of these nasty damn products and stuff like that. It's none of the xenoestrogen sort of causing issues and stuff like that, this sort of garbage. But I don't know enough about Ancestral hair care or stuff like that. So, you know, but, you know, I don't do Discord. I only do live stuff. I like to humiliate people live. It's a waste of time, Discord. It's a very small crowd. I like it to be taped and up there stand your ground, or go become a mouse and go to your corner, is my motto. But yeah, look, yes, shit, 8 minutes. I better go. Yes, it would definitely have to be on an independent, nothing he controls, so it would have to be like Drew Berry, or somebody who's independent, who basically wouldn't pull the plug on me or turn my microphone off or stuff like that. So I'm not going to have any of that shit. So it's going to be either a clean debate or it's not. And he will have to also provide the stuff, the research. What is he going to present? And I would provide also what I have to present. So he would have an opportunity to read it, and I would have an opportunity to read it, so we could debate that sort of stuff, what we have to present. Putting something up which I haven't seen before in my life, I can't comment on anything, that's just put up there. In many cases, it's going to be epidemiology, which I can just shoot down. Is it an observational study, young Richard? And he'll say, yes, it is. Well, then it's just crap, isn't it? Because it's only observational, highly confounded. It's irrelevant, So, but, and that's just, then I just have to start talking all over him and ignoring him. And that's the only way of winning that stupid debate. And then it just becomes a ridiculous debate. So if people are going to get anything out of it, it has to be basically where we basically are looking at specific things, and he's arguing why those things are or they're not in that regard. And I will have to point out to him, why he's wrong and why these things don't compute properly, and may have to do some little maths exercises on the screen to basically explain how to read these things and how to interpret these things, because he's got no idea. Anyway, studies, origin, change the outcome, blah, 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 blah. For example, LA from nuts versus vegetable oil. Nuts is probably going to be less problematic because it is in a whole food and oxidizes at a slower rate. But it's still not the same as animal foods where you only get trace elements even when you cook them. Remember the pork stuff that I actually showed video? Only trace elements. You cook nuts, even nuts, which is a whole food, you still will get slightly more than what you get in animal foods. So even plants that are whole plants, when you cook them, they will have higher, oxidative byproducts, aldehydes and whatever else. Definitely not to the level that seed oils that come out of an industrial refinery have. That's way beyond a joke. That stuff, that should have never been in the food supply. That's just pure toxins, So, and people in the past didn't actually munch on nuts. They were very expensive. Getting access to nuts is very difficult, let alone they've got so many anti-nutrients, the nuts. They are the worst for teeth health. They will really do damage to your teeth if you consume them in large amounts for a long period of time. So very bad stuff. Yes. Definitely. See ya. Yep. It's got to be clean. It's got to be independent. And studies need to be provided on both sides, so people have got time to look at them, research them, and argue against them, and be able to put up their own arguments. In my regards, I don't really need to present much, just a couple of things. He may want to present more, but there has to be a limit. You can't go on for hours, and it has to be, if you've got good research, you probably only need one study. You don't need multiples, or you need maybe 5 or 6, maybe 10 at most. So it has to be reasonable, so for time constraints and the ability to properly debate those studies. But I suspect he'll just bring up a whole lot of garbage, which will be easily shot down, and it'll be over. And then I'll be able to bring up some really good studies that he can't shoot down and he can't explain, and he'll look like a deal as normal. But that's nothing new. He shits himself on screen. So he doesn't seem to, anyway, he has no compulsions whatsoever. G'day, Kayla. Good to see you. You're late. Dusters, my dear, dusters. I bet you did, Richard. Anyway, I'm out of here. See yous. 3 minutes. Shit, I am late. Sorry, Ling. See yous. Thanks for being here. Please hit the like button on your way out. See yous.